Good morning. Thank you all for coming out. Today's another today's summit is a telecom summit, and the genesis of the summits are obviously when people call into our office, they want to know who does what, and so this is educational. So I appreciate everybody that's participating. So welcome to the telecom, and hopefully it's very informative. We'll start with prayer, if you'll bow with me. Gracious Heavenly Father, we thank you today, and thanks for all your many blessings, Lord. We pray that you would lead, guide, and direct us, give us wisdom and guidance as we seek to serve the people of the state of Mississippi. We pray that you would be with our country, Lord, that you would bless us with peace and prosperity, and that you would lead, guide, and direct the leaders that you placed over us. We thank you for all the good things in our lives and give you all the praise and glory. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.
Please stand for the pledge. Attention, salute, pledge. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Please be seated.
Any opening remarks? Okay. We'll get started. We're going to have a little change in schedule. We're going to recognize William Millett, Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency, U.S. Department of Homeland Security. You're recognized. Thanks. Yeah. Thanks for joining us. Thanks for joining us.
Sir, thank you. Thank you, commissioners, for having me. Good morning, everybody. As he said, my name is Greg Mallett, and I am, can you hear me? Can everybody hear me back there? Okay. I usually walk around when I speak, so I'll do my best to stay at the podium and not wander off today. Maybe
there's a microphone if you want to carry it around.
Oh, that's all right. That's all right. Let's see. Come on. Excuse me just a moment. Worked earlier. Leave it to the cyber guy to have technical issues, right? I always like to say the Chinese are trying to stop me everywhere I go, so just bear with us. All right, so my name again is Greg Mallett. I'm with the Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency. That is a sub-agency under the U.S. Department of Homeland Security, and I serve as the Cybersecurity State Coordinator for Mississippi. So I am the only cyber person in the state for CISA, and I cover a lot of ground. Based here in the Jackson area, and I'm constantly either up around Tupelo or Oxford or Corinth, somewhere in the north part of the state, or down on the coast. So like I said, we stay pretty busy here. So I'm going to talk to you today about securing critical infrastructure from cyber threats and how CISA can play a role in that. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the organization, and then I'm going to speak to some threats that are out there that are common, and then talk to you about what you can do to defend against those threats, and then some services that CISA offers our stakeholders. So we work with state and local governments, as well as all 16 sectors of critical infrastructure, to try to enhance and improve your cybersecurity resilience. That's our goal. And that's still not working.
Chinese getting you again?
So let's start over here. So CISA's focus is working with our state and local governments and critical infrastructure owners to try to build cybersecurity resilience. I mentioned that. That's our mission. So we lead the national effort to understand, manage, and reduce risk to our cyber and physical infrastructure. And we do that by partnering with our stakeholders. We're not a regulatory agency, so everything that you do with us is voluntary. I'm not an auditor or an inspector. I'm an advisor. So I work in an advisory role here, capacity. I mentioned we work with all 16 sectors of critical infrastructure. There they are up on the screen, kind of hard to read them, I know. But transportation, energy, emergency services, water and wastewater, healthcare, public health. These are all our critical infrastructure sectors, a disruption to whom can really affect our way of life. So we're focused on delivering cybersecurity tools and services to these sectors and entities in these sectors so that they can help them defend themselves. What I find doing assessments all across the state of Mississippi, many times there's just not a lot of resources available for entities to properly defend themselves. And I think there's a lack in the skill set out there too to implement the many controls that should be in place. But what I do is work with organizations, associations to try to build partnerships and share information. I mentioned we're not a regulatory agency, so there's no burden to share information with us regarding cyber attacks that occur for entities. Now that may change in the future, with the passage of a bill in 2022 called CERCIA, which has to do with critical infrastructure reporting. But it's in the rulemaking stage right now, so it hasn't been fully implemented. We're expecting that maybe in the coming year, where there will be a requirement to report if you have a ransomware attack or you pay a ransom or something like that within a certain time frame, because we have tools we can put in place to try to recover funds if we're notified early enough in the process. So that's what we do. I do a lot of public speaking. We do tabletop exercises. I do assessments all around the state for our stakeholders. So if you haven't been to our website, I encourage you to do that at CISA.gov. There are a whole host of different tools and services out there you can take advantage of on that website. And everything I'm going to speak about today can be found out there as well. In particular, we just released this publication in partnership with the NSA and the FBI, as well as some of our foreign partners, that talks about an enhanced visibility and hardening guidance for communications infrastructure. So I encourage everyone, especially in the telecom area, to go out to our website, get this information. If you're on my distro, you've probably already received it. So if you want to get on that, definitely get my card and we can get you set up on that. So I talk a lot about resilience. Our goal is to try to, again, build resilience in our stakeholders. And that is defined through this presidential policy directive as the ability to prepare for and adapt to changing conditions and withstand and recover rapidly from disruptions. I mean, that's the goal here. We can't prevent you from being attacked. It's likely going to happen at some point. But what we can do is help you bounce back quicker, all right? Help give you the ability to get back to normal operations as quickly as possible. You do that by preparing ahead of time, having certain controls in place and practices, performing the required training so that everyone knows their role in the event of a cyber attack. Here's a quick look at some of the risk landscape we're facing today. Just to list a few here. The most dangerous is always the insider threat. So it's nothing more damaging than somebody who is supposed to be in your system already that decides to do something wrong. Could be through malicious action. It could be a disgruntled employee. It could be just poor training and incompetence, essentially, in a role. We've seen that before. You know, I think back to my time. I used to be in the military for many years, and I worked in data centers for the Air Force, and in fact, later accredited data centers all around the world for them. But I worked in a data center where it was a cube farm, and when the network would go down, one of our first steps was to jump up and look in the cubicle next to me to see where my friend Steve was, because he had a tendency to look up things on the internet and then go try it on the live network. So that's not a great idea. But he wasn't a malicious actor, right? But he was definitely an insider threat, you know, when it came to uptime for the network. You know, acts of terrorism, we see that on a national scale, not so much locally, but it can affect us, definitely. Cyber attacks are what I see a lot of here in Mississippi, all right? Malware attacks, ransomware attacks on all different sectors, critical infrastructure sectors, as well as state and local governments. It's just become very commonplace, the nature of those attacks. So spend my weeks normally responding along with the FBI cyber unit and then the Mississippi Department of Homeland Security cyber unit, you know, trying to help these stakeholders once they come under attack. Extreme weather can be an issue. Down on the coast, it's all about hurricanes and preparation for that. You know, toward the northern part of the states, it's tornadoes. But they can both affect your network and your operations. Pandemics can be an issue. We've all had recent experience with that and how it affected how we go to work. A lot of people went to a remote status for working, which created additional threat vectors for our bad actors to take advantage of for us. So, and then accidents, technical failures, those are going to happen. Things are going to break, okay? The question is, how well have you codified the policies in your organization so that you're prepared to handle anything like these threats that come along? in terms of cybersecurity. You know, we tend to prepare more for physical attacks or situations than we do for cyber attacks. So that's something I'm trying to raise awareness of. You know, looking at the threats of today, I mentioned ransomware, malware. Seems like every week there's a new variant of ransomware that comes out. They always have these odd names that these organizations come up with. But they're damaging and they're not going away. One thing I do want to point out is down at the bottom there, advanced persistent threats. So that's a big deal for us right now. Coming from CISA and the U.S. Department of Homeland Security, this is something we're really focused on because what we're talking about here is nation-state actors like China, like Russia, like Iran, and they are making tremendous headway, unfortunately, in accessing our systems. In particular, our operating technology, or what we call OT. So you have IT that most people are familiar with, information technology, right? That's your laptop, servers, routers, switches, things like that. Those are the tools that we use to solve business problems, right? We communicate with them. We store information with them. We analyze information with our IT systems. Operational technology, or what we call OT, is everything else. It could be security systems, access control systems, environmental control systems for HVAC units, SCADA systems, PLCs used in water distribution or manufacturing. These are systems that are also connected to the network, but usually don't receive as much attention when it comes to defending those systems. And our adversaries know that. So they are taking advantage of the neglect of these systems. And what happens there is we see them accessing the operational technology side and traversing the network to get to the IT side, where we have our customer information, our financial data, health information, anything out there that we're trying to protect is then exposed. So it's not uncommon to hear a story about a hospital here in the state. Here happened recently where they had an outdated 20-year-old HVAC control unit that was connected to the internet. Threat actor was able to access that HVAC unit and from there traverse the network and get into the patient record system for the hospital. So this happens quite frequently. So this is a big focus for us, is trying to raise that awareness and highlight the need to put the proper controls for cybersecurity in place for the operational technology side of our entities. So, and then threats to external dependencies down there. You see, I'm talking about third-party relationships, supply chain risk here with your suppliers, vendors, infrastructure providers. Anybody that has access to your system represents a potential threat. Okay, that's a threat vector, you know, that we have to really pay attention to. Who's coming in, what they're doing while they're there. Many times that gets overlooked, unfortunately. Here's a quick look at the numbers for 22 over, or rather 23. I got this from the FBI. We'll be updating this soon, but you can see where complaints for criminal activity, they're up 10%, all right? 880,000 reports of cyber attacks. Now that is only those entities that were willing to report that information. I think the number is probably a lot higher than that. Financial losses from that, 22% is the increase. Ransomware attacks, almost $60 million there in reported losses. I think that's a really low number because here in Mississippi, we see ransomware amounts approaching 7 figures. So again, that's only the ones that would report that having happened. Business email compromise is another big one. You can see most of those losses, they are almost $3 billion in losses. And that's essentially good old-fashioned social engineering. You know, threat actors getting on the phone, talking someone into changing accounts at a bank or changing a password urgently, you know, getting them to make changes, not a highly technical process. You know, there's definite skill there in play, and they're very successful. Cyber criminals, they look for the targets of opportunity. So when I go and talk to organizations, I always stress that it's, again, not about if you get attacked, it's going to be when you get attacked, all right? The way they do that is quite simple. They scan the internet looking for openings. All right, everything that you have that touches the internet has a connection that can be seen by someone else, okay? So we provide tools for our stakeholders that help combat that so that you understand what you have exposed to the internet. It's just not complicated to run a ransomware attack anymore. You can have ransomware as a service, as it mentions up there. So gone are the days of a hacker in a basement in a hoodie in front of a screen, you know, this image that we have of those threat actors. You can go to the internet and subscribe to ransomware as a service, and a company will provide you a victim ready to go, initiate your attack, okay? 5 minutes is all it takes. So you need to be aware how simple it is and how commonplace it is. And it's not going away because it's quite profitable. We don't recommend anybody pay a ransom in a ransomware attack, but it is a business decision for every organization whether or not they're going to do that. What we find is they typically don't receive all their information back. Sometimes it's corrupted, or even backdoors are placed so they can attack again. So we think it's better for you to prepare and be ready to tell them no and have options. Unfortunately, we've seen even locally in government where they weren't prepared for that. And unfortunately, it came a long, drawn-out downtime for them. And in other areas where people were prepared, they told the ransomware threat actors, no thank you, and just reinstalled their whole system because they had good backups and they were prepared. So that's what we're trying to get people to, is that point where you can come back quickly. We just came out of October. That is our Cybersecurity Awareness Month for CISA. So we like to emphasize during that month and through the coming year some practices that individuals can do both for themselves personally and at work that will have the greatest impact on trying to securing your system and your personal data. So right up here, if you look, the first one is learning how to recognize and report phishing attempts, okay? Does everybody in here know what phishing attacks are? So they come in the form of emails or text messages. They're usually trying to urgently get you to click on a link, to try to open an attachment, trying to get you to take some action. You should be suspicious of these, anything that asks you to do that. Because once you click that link or open that attachment, malware can be downloaded onto your system and it could compromise your whole network. So we do see this as a common practice here in Mississippi, and unfortunately a lot of organizations do fall victim to this. So it's important to have good training in your organization so that your users know how to identify this and properly respond to it by reporting. The other is using strong passwords. Seems like a no-brainer, right? But if you're using a password in your organization of 6 characters, 8 characters, 10 characters, it's not enough, okay? It's important to use numbers, letters, special characters, uppercase, lowercase, but it's also important to have a longer password. We recommend at least 15 characters. I know that's a lot. You can blame the threat actors. And there's nothing more personal than talking to an organization about the password policy, right? Nobody wants a long password. But unfortunately, it's a necessity. And if you don't do anything different, make it longer. I talked to an organization the other day where they were proud of the move they had made. They had changed their password policy, and they'd gone from 8 characters to 10. And they said, we're getting good. And I said, well, actually, you need to go further. Unfortunately, you just made everybody mad, and you didn't make yourself any more secure. So you want to take advantage, use passphrases, use different tools, password managers that are out there to try to accomplish that. So turning on multi-factor authentication is the next thing. That's an important step to defending any system. That's where you're something beyond a password is what we're looking for with your username, right? If you're using apps to access health sites or financial sites, you're getting probably the option to get a PIN sent to you through email or text message, right? That is a form of multi-factor authentication. We would like to see something a little more secure than that, what we call phishing resistant, because if the threat actors accessed your email account, well, they're also going to see that token when it comes to you, right? So there are different means for doing that. There's facial recognition, biometrics. You can use card tokens, but we want you to turn on and use the most secure form of multi-factor authentication that you can technically put in place. And then updating software. That seems obvious too. But unfortunately, there are unpatched systems out there that get breached all the time. So you want to turn on automatic updates everywhere you can, at your work for your business computers, at home for your personal systems, on your phones, everywhere you can, make sure you have automatic updates on. If you get the option to click, do it later, do not click that. I urge you to go ahead and apply the updates. There's a reason they're being pushed out. So that's just 4 things I wanted to highlight for individuals and businesses alike. Now, we do assessments at CISA. I spend my time traveling around the state doing policy assessments and technical assessments for entities, large and small. If you're not doing that, any organization that doesn't have regular assessments done, they don't know what they have. They don't know where their gaps are. They don't know the issues they're facing or how to protect their systems. So we stress that it's important to do that. Being a federal entity, I often get the question as well, what are you going to do with the information that I share with you? I can tell you it is protected under this program, the Protected Critical Infrastructure Information Program, which guards the information that you share with me from FOIA request or civil litigation or any other type regulatory requirements. So we do not share that information. Again, I'm not an inspector and an auditor. I'm an advisor. So it's a voluntary relationship we have, but we are protecting the information. Real quick look at some of the services that we're offering. You've heard me mention that we provide some things for people. So the first thing I'd like to highlight is our vulnerability scanning, also called cyber hygiene or CyHy for short. And this is a scan that you can enroll in where we will scan your external IP range. We don't scan the internal part of your system. We're looking at what's visible to the world, okay? So we're going to scan all your outward-facing IPs that you tell us to scan, and we're looking for open ports, unpatched vulnerabilities, misconfigurations, anything that the threat actors can take advantage of. We're trying to identify and make you aware of so you can close those gaps, okay? So this is a service that you sign up for. It runs repeatedly. It's not a once and done. It's actually a very expensive service if you were to try to purchase it in the commercial world. We are offering all of these services at no cost to our stakeholders, again, state and local governments and critical infrastructure entities. So this is, we bought bulk licenses for them to use, because what I find is most entities are not doing this, so they're unaware of what's exposed to the internet, okay? You do that by signing up, sending an email to vulnerability@cisa.dhs.gov and just requesting the service. If you're one of those entities that fall into those categories, then we'll enroll you in that. You can take advantage of it. Web application scanning is another service that goes along with that. We do something similar to the websites themselves for entities. Cybersecurity performance goals is something I want to highlight. This is an assessment that I do. CISA came up with this about 1.5 years ago to try to establish a baseline for all organizations, cross-sector, okay, every entity that we work with, as a minimum should have these controls in place. We look at 38 different controls that map back to the NIST cybersecurity framework, and we highlight those things for the organizations because they should have at least this in place. This is not a comprehensive assessment, but it is a starting point. And it gives us an idea of what the maturity level of those organizations is when it comes to cybersecurity. So critical that we get in front of as many people as we can with this to show them. Also to educate them so that they know if they're partnering with some third party to do their IT and cybersecurity work, they need to know the questions to ask and the services to request. So many times that's the problem, is that they'll hire, an organization will hire an IT company to do work for them, but they're not sure what to ask them to do. So we try to educate in that way and make sure that they have those minimums in place. There are many other services. I'll run through them really quick. Ransomware readiness assessment is to help you understand how you might fare in the event of a ransomware attack. We also manage the .gov domain, so public entities who want to get a .gov domain for their email or their website can do that through me. There's other tools like Logging Made Easy and Protective DNS that are that, again, to help you harden your network and understand what you have, we make these available at no cost. Incident management review is an assessment that I do with organizations to try to help them develop an incident response plan and see if they are missing parts of it that would be key. And then we exercise those plans using tabletop exercises. So I come in and moderate. We have a national team that does that as well. And we're doing that all over the state for different organizations, particularly in K-12 education, doing a lot of this. So external dependencies management is looking at those third-party relationships, cyber infrastructure survey, a close look at controls, and then cyber resilience review. That's a comprehensive policy assessment looking at all 10 domains of cybersecurity so that you understand what you should have policies and procedures for. And if you don't, we help you build them. And of course, we do technical assessments as well, like remote penetration test, on-site pen test, where we try to get into your system and see how far we can go, to expose any vulnerabilities there. And then validated architecture design reviews as well. So we get pretty technical, but we start out with something simple like the CPGs and work our way through the other catalog. But again, none of these services cost anything. You've already paid for them with your tax dollars. So unfortunately, we don't advertise. So if you haven't heard it from me, you probably are unaware of this completely. So I appreciate the opportunity to share this information. Known exploited vulnerabilities are crucial to us. Everybody knows there's thousands of vulnerabilities out there in systems. You get patches all the time. We maintain a database of those particular vulnerabilities that threat actors are using today to break into systems. So this is important for IT department or cyber department to be aware of this catalog and get alerts from it, because if you have these vulnerabilities, you're likely already compromised. Just don't know it. The last thing I want to highlight here is our efforts to get ahead of ransomware attacks. So Congress gave us that order 2 years ago to come up with a way to try to be proactive. And we have partnered with certain entities that are trusted entities that are active on the dark web. And they will share information with us when we see an attack is imminent for one of our stakeholders. So if it happens in Mississippi, they reach out to me, and I get with the stakeholder to let them know exactly what system is compromised and where the attack is coming from, and so they can isolate that system. So we've had some really good success here in Mississippi doing that. Unfortunately, sometimes people don't believe who we are. If I call you up and say, hey, this is Greg with CISA, and I've got some really good information for you, and I need to get it to you, do you mind giving me your Gmail account so I'll send it? Right? I get hung up on a lot with that. What I'm looking for is an out-of-band communication method so that the threat actor, if they're in your system, won't know that I'm notifying you, right? So I'm looking for something outside of your work email system to get you that information. But this is a big push that we have, and again, we've had some good success here in Mississippi with this, and we continue to do this on a weekly basis. I did one yesterday, in fact. So that's being worked out there. So some questions here as I close. Think about this. How would law enforcement coordinate with you as an affected organization in the wake of a cyber attack? Do you know who you'd call? Do you know what resources are out there and who can help you in any given situation? What do you want to know in the first 30 minutes of a cyber attack? Maybe is it still ongoing? How far did they get? Right? How are you going to do that? What are you willing to share in the first 30 minutes of a cyber attack, and who's allowed to share it? Can anybody jump on social media and say, oh my gosh, look what's happening at work today? Right? You don't want that. You want to have all that worked out ahead of time. Everybody knows their role, right? Until you understand what's happening, I don't recommend you go public with it. So, and then what steps are you going to take in the next 30 days to improve cybersecurity in your operations? So just some things to think about there. There are information sharing opportunities out there. The Multi-State Information Sharing and Analysis Center is a resource for public entities. They provide a 24/7 SOC operation to help support you in the event of an attack. And it's an organization that you can reach out to and become a member of and take advantage of their services. Every industry has their own ISAC, so it just depends on what sector you're operating in. There's several of the icons there on that screen for you to investigate, but I highly recommend you reach out to your corresponding organization to find out the services that are available in helping you protect your systems. They have come on site. MEMS ISAC came on site for us last year in Mississippi when we had the Singing River Hospital ransomware attack down on the coast, and as well as a couple of others. So they are very active here in Mississippi. Lastly, these are some numbers, some information about who you can call in the event of an attack. Okay, most people don't realize they should reach out to CISA. Let me know. As state coordinator, it's my job to make sure you're in touch with the right people. The FBI, the Jackson Field Office of the FBI has a cyber unit, and we work in conjunction on a weekly basis to respond to attacks here in Mississippi. But organizations, I encourage them to reach out ahead of time to establish it as part of their instant response, include these numbers in there, and reach out and build relationships with these entities ahead of time. You know, that's an important thing to do. Looking for who to call in the event of an attack is a terrible time to do that. All right. And there is my contact information, as well as my colleague, Max Finn. I mentioned that it's a cybersecurity and infrastructure security agency. I do the cybersecurity part, and Max is a protective security advisor. He does the physical security. So I like to say he handles the gates, guns, and guards, and I do the cyber. So Max can do physical assessments on facilities, walk-arounds, and make recommendations there. He also does bomb threat training, active shooter training, things of that nature. So again, there's our information, and sir, I'm ready for questions if you have them.
Thank you. Very informative. Appreciate you coming and sharing that with us. Commissioner Stamps, you have any questions?
First off, thank you for being thorough.
Yes, sir.
I look at what you shared, and I think about all the local governments, the cities and counties that are out there who aren't informed and don't have clear policies. Do you have any like template policy for a city or a county that we could work with to help become, the adopted policy for any municipality that doesn't have a cybersecurity program?
Yes, sir. In fact, we do that quite often. We have a tool called the CSET tool. It's CSET. It's downloadable from our website, and it contains all of the assessments that we do, as well as policy templates. And there are a number of other sources for policy templates out there. Now, unfortunately, policies need to be fairly customized. In general, you can use some templates out there, but it's important that the work be done in-house to customize those for the organization, because from that, you establish a policy and you're going to build out standard operating procedures from those policies. So the policies say we will perform this activity. The procedures say how you're going to perform it, right? So yes, we do that quite often with cities and counties here in Mississippi. I work with a number of them right now to try to help them develop policies. We also encourage them to look at for partnership opportunities, in particular with universities here in Mississippi. So we've had some successful efforts to pair graduate students in cybersecurity and information assurance with entities like hospitals and local governments that need help writing those policies. So we're able to create an internship for those students with those entities to develop policies specifically. So it helps the entity needing the policies, and it gives those students real-life work experience. So that's a big push we have here in the state, too.
Do you facilitate any trainings with the Mississippi Municipal League or the County Board of Supervisors organization?
Yes, sir. I work closely with both. I've spoken at their annual events, and I work very hard to try to get to their IT people, because that's really who needs to get this information and understand how to implement it. But I do work closely with Mississippi Association of Supervisors with them, and they have actually put in place some requirements for cyber insurance that include some of these controls and assessments that I'm talking about here. So we are actively working with them. We appreciate any assistance, though, getting the word out.
Well, thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Yes, sir.
Thank you, Commissioner. Just a few questions. Where do most of the cyber attacks you see in the state originate?
Most of the attacks I see are from foreign entities. Typically, ransomware attacks are usually from some Russian-affiliated organization and sponsored. Not to say it can't be someone within the states, but that's just what we're seeing out there. The attacks that come from the People's Republic of China and organizations under them like Volt Typhoon and Salt Typhoon. They're primarily trying to embed themselves in our operational technology. They're not as active at disrupting those systems, but we believe they're waiting for a particular time and positioning themselves to do that.
What are the, is there a particular software that y'all recommend? I know somebody said there was a Russian one, Kaspersky or something like that. Do not use that.
Well, that particular software is actually banned now in the United States. So yeah, do not use that. We don't endorse any particular brand of software, but having a good virus prevention software is important, as well as having a SIM system or some way to collect logs and understand what's happening in your network. So there are a number of tools out there available for that. And some of these tools can be obtained through both CISA and the MSISAC at no cost, for particularly for state and local governments. So,
have you seen any cyber attacks on utilities, like water or power systems?
Yes, sir. Unfortunately, yes. And one of our focus areas is water and wastewater in particular, because what we find is there's very few resources at the local level for those entities to put proper controls in place. I met with a water association yesterday, and they were completely unaware of what they should be doing to protect their systems, unfortunately. So that makes them pretty easy targets. And they do have a lot of operational technology and SCADA systems that manage the water distribution in their organizations and the treatment side of things. So that's an area we really need to work, and it's one of 4 areas that CISA is highly focused on, and particularly in this state: water and wastewater, healthcare and public health, K-12 education, and of course election security, which we're also responsible for. Those are our areas of emphasis here in the state, and I try to work with as many entities as I can get in front of for that.
So you work, when you say you're working with Rural Water Association?
Yes,
guys?
sir.
Okay.
I do training events for Rural Water Association frequently. They have me in because their operators have requirements for training hours, and cybersecurity is a part of that. So I regularly speak with those organizations as much as I can.
I'd like to bring attention to something you said, that somebody actually had a portal into the system through an antiquated or older HVAC thermostat system,
Yes,
which is something that we wouldn't think about.
right.
And so I connect mine to the internet, and it shows me the weather, but is it secure? So I'll double check that. Thanks for that tip.
Good idea.
Yeah. A few more questions. You mentioned that there were websites that sell ransomware and actually provide victims. So what's the recourse? Obviously, that's got to be illegal. So what's the recourse to that?
Well, these are not U.S. organizations. These are foreign entities, so that we're kind of limited in what we can do in going after them. We have to rely on the partnership with our allies in that effort. But unfortunately, there's just not a lot of recourse there at this time. That would probably be a better question to pose to the FBI, because they are the ones pursuing that.
And I notice y'all, your organization has a lot of acronyms like ours. So.
Yes, acronym heavy, yes.
Yes, a lot of acronyms. How does Homeland Security ensure the resilience of its internal cybersecurity systems, especially in light of increasing threats from nation-state actors?
Oh, sorry, say that again.
How does the Homeland Security ensure resilience of its internal cybersecurity systems, especially in light of increasing threats from nation-state actors?
Great question. So we work very hard to implement these controls that we're talking to our stakeholders about. And of course, my background is on the federal side. Prior to coming to DHS, I worked for the Department of Commerce, where I was the ISO for the National Water Center under NOAA. And we had to comply with CISA's standards and recommendations. Everything maps back to NIST, the National Institutes of Standards and Technology. They provide the how-to, essentially, of defending networks and building them and hardening them. So we implement every recommended best practice that is out there. Again, it's not 100%. Nothing is. unfortunately, and we've suffered from that as well. But again, the key is being able to recover quickly and get back to operations as soon as possible. So we are working very hard to do that with the entire federal government, not just DHS.
Can you share your slide deck with us?
Yes, sir. Be glad to.
And can we post it? Is there anything on there that we can't?
Yes, let me
We'll review that with you before
Yes,
we do it.
sure.
But yeah, if you can provide the slide deck, that'd be
Glad to.
great. Any other questions, Commissioner? Well, thank you so much. Very, very informative. Thanks for coming and being so thorough and for the work that you do.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you. Next, we have C.D. Smith here. Mr. Smith. Thanks for joining us, Mr. Smith.
So Commissioners,
C.D. Smith is Regional Director of AT&T, so he's going to give us a general update on cell internet issues in the future. Thank you for joining us.
and thank you for the invitation. So, okay. So I need to, before I get started, share something with you. So I've been coming over here for many years to this room for meetings, docket calls and other things. And you know how you go down the highway and your car will automatically go to the left because you go that way all the time. And for a particular meeting, you need to go to the other direction, but your car took you just because. So coming here this morning, even though I had a copy of the agenda, in my mind, I just knew this meeting started at 10 o'clock. So I do want to apologize for you having to alter the schedule, but thank you for that. So I'll start this way. So if I'm on the payroll with AT&T by on the 30th of this month, I will have completed 50 years with AT&T. So, you know, it's been an interesting journey over the years with the company. And also, it's rather interesting, and I've got my co-worker and boss here with me who's going to come and join me and do part of this presentation. But interestingly, you know, we can go back, the first telephone, and this is, I'm going to give a bit of history. We're going to talk about where we've been, where technology has taken us over the years, where we are, and address the future. But so I'm from Vicksburg, so is Mike Walker, who's joining me. And it was back in 1881 when the first telephone was installed in Mississippi, in our hometown of Vicksburg. And that was back in 1881. And what's really interesting about all of that, it was back in the 1800s when AT&T, or American Telephone and Telegraph, reached an agreement with the state Mississippi legislature to establish a communications network for the state of Mississippi. As a result of that, we were able to establish the network for the state of Mississippi, and it resulted in AT&T being granted what would be equivalent to a statewide franchise with access to all public rights-of-ways in perpetuity. And that's kind of how things have gone for us over the time, 143 to 144 years of providing communications or connectivity here in Mississippi. So the one constant in my time with AT&T has been change driven by technological breakthroughs, change driven by centralization of function, and change in consumer demand, consumers' needs. For example, and there'll be people here who've never ever tried to operate the old dial telephone. And it's interesting, if you give a kid one of the telephones with the old-fashioned dial, where you know you go, shh, And if you have to dial a number with a 9 in it and you mess up, oh Lord, you start over again. So going back to the dial telephone, then there was the touch-tone telephone, and so as technology evolved, communications delivery changed. And I'm sure you all can remember coin phones, public telephones located at every corner, every grocery store, every airport, coin telephones, public telephones. And it's kind of interesting as other technology evolved, all of a sudden here comes these brick cell phones, the Motorola Gold brick phone. And as that technology, and that was the very first of the cell phones or wireless communications, as that evolved, it was right about the time of the growth of wireless communications is when the need for and the demand for public communications diminished. And by the time the demand grew for wireless communications and the need for public communications, by the time on a graph they crossed each other, we were out of the coin telephone business. There's just very little need for that kind of service. And we can talk about just the network that permeated this state, being a wireline network that covered all but one county. We had service in all wireline communications in all but one county in the state of Mississippi, and that was, so you know, Calhoun County, and that was served by an independent company. But you know, it's rather interesting that as consumer demand just changed, it was clear that the old network, the old style of communications was going to eventually go away. And we're at a stage right now where we're transitioning away from landline. Our focus going forward, and if you could, is on expanding our wireless network and expanding our broadband network. That's where the focus is, and that's where we've evolved to that, and we've gotten away from other product delivery other than meeting the needs of delivering that kind of connectivity. Everything we do is about connectivity. And if you just go to the next slide there, oh, you gave it to me. What did we do? Not that there. So, all right, let's talk about what we've done here in Mississippi over the 144 years. Like over the last 5 years, AT&T has invested $1.3 billion to expand and enhance the network across Mississippi. And whether it's to expanding high-speed internet connectivity or it's rural areas, boosting wireless coverage in urban centers, we're committed to making sure that connectivity continues for everyone in Mississippi. And of course, we're in a new phase now where broadband is so important. We have brought AT&T Fiber to more than 310,000 customer locations in over 60 communities across Mississippi. And we've laid over 2.6 million miles of fiber strand in the state. And these aren't just numbers, but they're connectivity. They're needed resources for education, for business, and this is an opportunity of connectivity. That's the word, connectivity. And also, we have, through our investment in the state of Mississippi, we also contribute over $100 million annually in state and local taxes, which also helps drive the state's economy. So with this, I'm going to stop with the history lesson, and then we'll let Michael come forward, and he'll talk about where we're going from here, bridging the digital divide, and going forward with the rest of this presentation. But I do, one more time, apologize for having my time I just knew this meeting started at 10 o'clock.
You're fine. We're in good shape. Thank you.
Well, after 50 years, you deserve to be,
Yeah.
be late one day.
And so, I'm, as I've shared with others, after 50 years, after that means you're on up in age. And I attribute gaps like that to, being self-diagnosed with CRS. Yeah, that's right.
Can't remember stuff.
That's right. All right, so Michael, carry on from here.
Thank you, CT, and it's a pleasure indeed to be here and meet with you, Commissioner Stamps and Commissioner Brown. I'm delighted on behalf of AT&T to just share a little bit about where we are, and CD set it up extremely well for me. The big thing that we're working on now is we look at the investment we've made and how we grow the business. We're looking at the fiber investment because, as we know, the world is changing. The need for telecommunications and high-speed internet or broadband service is just overwhelming, and we learn our lessons. I think the entire industry learned the lessons from COVID when we had a shift where more people were working from home, schools from home. All those type of things exposed some of the things that we knew about the network, but it had not been that big of a problem, if you will, if I could use that term. So we're in the process now of building out our fiber network. We are working through a public and private partnership with the government, work with our local BEAM office in the state of Mississippi to utilize some of the BEAD dollars. In Mississippi, we're going to have close to 1.3 billion, just south of 1.3 billion dollars, and there's a process in place. And I thought I saw Sally's name to be on. I'm not going to go into her spiel, Ms. Doty, and the BEAM office, and moving towards the BEAD. You get tongue twisted trying to get all those together. But we are in the process of what they call a LOI, the letter of intent. So I'm not going to be able to go into details on where we plan to go because it's a very competitive process, and we have competitors in the markets too that would love to know where we would be going, because AT&T provides service in 81 of 82 counties, 81% of the land area of the state. And so we have a desire, a need to provide service to as many of our existing customers as we can. You can go to the next slide, if you will. Or do I have that? Okay. And this is a little bit about how the network works, a combination of wireless, fiber, and then also our FirstNet service that is dedicated to our first responders, those when we have storms, who have to be able to communicate when the service is bad. They have priority over the network. So when a storm happened, a hurricane on the coast, or any kind of weather, our first responders, or those in that particular capacity, will have preeminence over the network for other users. So we can make sure we build out to get the network back in place. Next slide. How did I just print? As I mentioned earlier, I was talking about the BEAD dollars and BEAM. This slide shows you the amount of money that was set aside by the federal government through the American Rescue Plan, which is part of what we bid on with the CPF one portion. AT&T did win a couple of grants, and we're in the process of working through that process and start building out that infrastructure in counties in North Mississippi and also in Central Mississippi. And then also the big money, the $65 billion, that is part of what we call the BEAD funding. And it shows where that money, how that money is broken down. And of that $42.5 billion for broadband deployment, Mississippi was able to get just south of $1.3 billion on that project. Next one. What did I do? Can you get me back on? I'm sorry. Next one, please. It's amazing that when you work in technology, you don't really know how to use technology. It's almost amazing how it always works. This is just a slide that shows you how the infrastructure is set up, how the fiber goes from our equipment inside the central office to what we call in the neighborhood, a PFP, And then to the street level, those terminals or boxes that some people call them, and their placement, and that's always a big issue because everyone wants the service, but no one wants the equipment near them. So we always trying to, we're challenged with how we place our infrastructure, how we, what we bury. There's some cases where we put fences around it or shrubbery to make it look better, but it comes with the territory. It's sort of like everybody wants to improve wireless technology in the rural areas, but no one wants a huge cell tower anywhere near their property.
I mean, you can put one in my backyard. As
As
long as my cell phone works, I'll be happy with it.
I agree with you, Commissioner. So
Okay.
if you need a spot, we're good.
Well, we wish everyone felt like you guys did, but unfortunately, that's not the case. I know there's a process to use this thing, the right? Okay, I'm sorry. Once again, when you talk about our fiber network and what's involved, placing the fiber, we have a very extensive underground network where we have fiber in the ground through manholes, and we bring it up and we connect it to our cabinets, and the cabinets to closures, and the closures we run a fiber directly into the customer's home to provide that high-speed network, high-speed service. As I mentioned earlier, this is all possible because of public-private partnership with companies like AT&T and other ISPs, and funds are being provided by the federal government. I think what makes us unique is that we have a lot of experience and expertise in this area, having been in the business for over 143 years, and now we're in the process of being able to completely retrofit a copper network that was built for voice into a fiber network that is available for data and broadband. So if you're looking at it, I always kind of like to use the example, if you have a 143-year-old house and you're rebuilding it, and someone's building a brand new house across the street and able to build in all these fancy things in the beginning while you're trying to maintain the 143-year-old house, keep that going where people, so you can live in it, and at the same time retrofit everything so you can be competitive with those who are building something from scratch. And that's the challenge that we have, and I have to tip my hat to the remarkable work of our technicians and what they do to make sure that we keep a seamless transition from the copper network to the fiber network. There are some challenges with that, but we've been able to step up to the plate thus far with that. Our commitment to the digital divide, there are a couple of issues that we work with. One is, if you build it, can they afford it? So the access, the AT&T access plan is a low-cost option that we have that's $30 a month for 100 megabit service up and down for customers. With the old ACP, which has gone away, that service would eventually be free. We hope that at some point in time, Congress will revisit that and provide some more funding for ACP, because there was a $30 discount, and with our access plan, it was $30. Low-income customers were able to get internet, that service essentially at no cost. One of the things that I'm proud of the company and what we do, there are a couple of things we work on. We talk about access, also affordability, but we have to also make sure that when we provide the internet and customers have them, it serves no purpose if they don't know how to use it. So we have a very aggressive program where we're putting devices in the hands of those who need them. We're doing digital literacy classes. As a matter of fact, we did a pilot program with the Mississippi Broadband Association earlier this year, pilot programs in Warren and Coahoma County, where we identified a group of customers, and mostly adults, and we provided digital literacy training with them, and we also gave away a total of over 400 laptop computers. And the interesting thing about that was a lot of those customers, people who participated in the program, saw that the access that they were given with the computer was a life changer. There was one lady who was taking a GED class who was using her cell phone to take her GED classes, and the laptop allowed her to be able to take that class using the computer. It was a life changer for her as she shared her testimony on how much it has improved her ability to improve the quality of life for herself and her children. She saw it as a generational change what she was given exposed to. But not only that, but locally, we've done some things with the Boys and Girls Club of Central Mississippi. We gave over 225 laptops to them, along with a foundation grant of over $48,000. I'm sorry. I know if they were listening, they would want the rest of that money, but it was only $48,000. We also did a project with parents of public schools to help parents who have children at home. The parents have the ability to use the computer to help their children at home with their computers as well. A very aggressive device distribution program, and also grants that we provided that we can help bridge the digital divide by teaching literacy, giving devices, and also making this service available for many customers across the state. We're very aggressive with that. There's a lot to do. One company can't do it all. As you know, it's going to take all the providers finding their niche and working with their customer base. We are partnered with the Mississippi Broadband Association to do some of these things. So we're excited about where we are and what the future holds for the state of Mississippi, and AT&T playing this part by not only building out the network, but also providing digital literacy classes to those who are in need for it, and also providing access to devices and a level of service that's affordable to all Mississippians. So I appreciate, I don't know if I have another slide. I think that's it. That wraps it up. The slide that was shown was actually from what our corporate learning centers that we have in Tupelo, Mississippi. And you see Senator Roger Wicker there. That's a unique program because we provided not only computers, we provided free fiber service to that organization for 3 years that would allow them to provide access to not only the students involved, but their parents. We do a lot of interactive work with employees who participate and do a lot of mentoring and tutoring. It's interesting that this particular group is a Hispanic group that's located in Tupelo. It's called El Centro, and it's been a very, very successful program. And you know, we have employees who work with AT&T who in Texas, who are very fluent in Spanish that can talk and help mentor some of these students. So we're very excited about how we're using all the resources that the company has to address those type issues.
Looks like you have the mayor of Tupelo in that picture too.
The mayor of Tupelo as well. I'm sorry. Yeah, the mayor of Tupelo. They're supervisors, and I think there's also a legislator that's in the picture. And I was on the side. I was out the way.
Okay.
But thank you. That's all for the AT&T presentation. I appreciate CD bringing this opportunity to us, as well as the commission giving us an opportunity to talk a little bit about what we do at AT&T and how we're trying to not only bridge the gap, but how we're building out our network so that we can provide fiber service, high-speed broadband to customers across the state. Thank you.
Thank you for your presentation. Commissioner Stamps, any questions?
Well, I just want to say that I appreciate you for coming in, and you know, we've seen you come to all these meetings over the years, but I appreciate your expertise and your wisdom and your mentorship over the years.
Thank you.
Again, thank y'all for your presentation. Just to clarify, do you know what's after 5G?
Well,
Is anything on the horizon?
there are a lot of technologies on the horizon, but you know, we got to get this out first and get it working. There's another iteration of the technology that's coming. We have a pretty good footprint on 5G. There are a lot of things that we're doing, but it's sort of like when you start talking about, well, how are we going to utilize AI, artificial intelligence, the Internet of Things. All these things are they're in play, and as you all know, technology can change. So we invest and we go as we go along, but what's next is just kind of hard to make a commitment on what we're going to be doing next because we don't know how technology is going to change because it changes so quickly.
It is transformative. You mentioned a young lady was accomplished her education via high-speed internet. Well, my children did too. So they did online school, not only in high school, but also in college. So it is transformative, and it is the information superhighway is our modern day version of the interstate system.
Absolutely.
That gives our people access to the world, and you can earn a living from your living room, which is pretty amazing time.
That is amazing. It sort of almost make location incidental. I mean, wherever you are, if you have access to broadband, you can do just about anything. And I would just tell you, just from the two pilots that we did and have an opportunity to sit in a room with a lot of consumers, customers, if you will, that did not have access to a device that would allow them to get online and utilize all the tools that were available for them. And to just sit down and talk to the young lady who was taking GED on a cell phone. And you can imagine how that was, and to have that computer. And even though she may not have had internet at all locations, she could use the hotspot on a cell phone to have access so she could take her exams and do the study that she needed to on a bigger screen. So
Completely
that's
amazing how much information is at our fingertips. It's a great age to be alive. I'm old enough to remember the encyclopedias, and you know they were outdated, and then you had to go to the library to find anything. But now, this generation and future generations, literally, you can learn anything online. I'll fix a car now watching a YouTube video thanks to high-speed internet, and so it's an exciting time in our country. Yes,
Thank you.
Would make one other comment. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The best analogy that I've been able to come up with when it comes to the importance of broadband and internet is from the town of Crystal Springs. Yeah. And many folks have heard me say this before, but years ago, the town of Crystal Springs was not where it is today. It was about 7 miles away.
Right.
But when they brought the railroads through, they said, hey, our town is going to dry up if we don't move the town to the railroad. So they basically bought all the land right in front of where the railroad was going to be, and they reorganized the town and picked it up brick by brick and moved the entire town to the railroad so that the town could survive, and it has survived over time. Well, I don't believe that we currently understand across the whole state how serious and important broadband is, because they identified at that time that their town was going to dry up. But now, if you don't have broadband in your town will dry up. It will dry up rather quickly, because young people are not buying property where you don't have broadband.
Right.
So that means that if no one wants to buy your land, the value of your land and property in your community is going to diminish. That's why I use that example all the time, because I don't believe enough of our local leaders understand what will happen to that town in 20 years if you do not have full-scale broadband across every factor of your municipality or your county.
Well, Commissioner, you hit the nail on the head, because the vision of leadership is what determined that. And as we go across the state, and I don't know if Ms. Doty is here or anyone from the BEAM office, and we have all the community meetings, and we try to find these the anchor tenants, locations where people need broadband. That's information that's stored locally. And how do you share that with ISPs like AT&T and others, so we'll know exactly where the gaps are, where the deficit. And it requires all of us working together for a common goal to make sure that as much as possible, every household, every home has access to high-speed internet. And as I mentioned, there are a lot of ISPs involved in the process. It may not be AT&T that brings it, but through the monies that's available and different options, not only through fiber, but also there are going to be some wireless options with a service like fixed wireless internet or something like that, that will give you the speed that's necessary to be the game changer in your life. That's what we're working on.
You know, one of the best pieces of legislation I worked on when we were in the House together was the broadband bill. And, you know, since that time, we've been beating the bushes trying to get people to understand that even if you don't use internet, property value matters. And your property will not be valuable ever again if it does not have broadband. And I just wish that more communities, local leaders would understand the severity of that and the ramifications that are going to happen. Because there'll be people that says that they'll say discrimination, they'll say all types of things. But we don't have as much interest in the broadband, the BEAM website, and all the tools that we've been trying to push out there for the last 3 or 4 years. And it hadn't sunk all the way in yet. And I would hate for the bitter taste of regret to cause many of our communities to be in a point of demise because of inactivity and lack of focus of leadership. So I appreciate you for continuing to try to raise awareness. We've been trying to raise awareness on this issue, but it's up to the citizens to go back to your mayors and your council people and say, this is serious. My last point I'm gonna make is my house district became the fastest deployment of broadband in the state because when we wrote the bill, I just did the same process it took to get elected. Went back and knocked on doors and walked people through the process. But what happened is that we had, it was averaging about 15% increase in property values when they got broadband. But we had places in our community that houses were $40,000 and $50,000. And within a few years, those same communities' houses were $100,000 and $150,000. So it's real economic development just with putting broadband in communities that haven't had it before. And I'm saying it now so that hopefully someone at the local level will understand and get in action, because there's too much inaction and distraction away from these serious topics like broadband.
Commissioner, I'll echo that. And there was a technology conference in Tupelo that they put on, and it was reported there that North Mississippi is the most connected rural area in the nation. Mm-hmm. And like Commissioner Stamp said, it was vision, like Crystal Springs. Mm-hmm. They had vision to deploy that technology as early as they could, and they brought a lot of different groups in to try to make sure that happened. I know AT&T was part of it, but and it's benefited them. It's benefited us in that area. I mean, obviously, you can't have economic development without high-speed internet. It's not going to happen. And so we built Toyota cars. You know, when I was younger, I never thought that we would have a car manufacturer in Mississippi. Now we have two large ones, but that plant in Blue Springs obviously wouldn't be there without high-speed internet. Wouldn't be there without our infrastructure, our highway infrastructure. And I'll brag on that plant. They make Corollas there, and they export that car to 18 different countries out of Mississippi, and it has a higher initial quality than the Japanese plant. So Mississippi is on the move, and we can do better. And it takes the vision that Commissioner Stamps was talking about. And we are, I agree with him, it's one of the best things we did while we were in the House. We served together, and we know that it's important to make sure our communities know how important it is to them in the future, not only for educational purposes, but for economic development and property values. So thank you for what you're doing in Mississippi.
Just one simple comment. Your predecessor on the commission, I remember he constantly talked about the EPAs and the fact that the power grid, as a result of EPA's power was brought to rural areas. And of course, with that effort that he was involved in too, was to allow for you, the legislature, to allow the EPAs to actually get into the broadband business. And as a result of it, going through COVID, many locations that had inadequate, and my home was one, a broadband access, which was the only product we had from AT&T. It was very slow. And because of COVID, my granddaughter needed access to faster broadband. But ultimately, through the efforts of my local EPA, Electric Power Association, we now have access to adequate, very good broadband service. And I think, the rural areas were difficult to prove in for a for-profit operation. But now with the efforts with Sally and Beam and Bede, I think Mississippi, as far as the nation's concerned, but here in Mississippi, there is indeed a genuine intent to ensure that everybody has access to adequate broadband.
Thank you both for your presentation. Thank you for joining us and for educating us on what AT&T is doing and what the future plans are. We're a little ahead of schedule. We're going to take a 5-minute break and let Beam get ready. I think Kyle Brown is with us today. So we'll let y'all get set up, and we'll be back in 5 minutes. Everybody can get a seat. Move into to the next presenter. With us today, we have Deputy Director Kyle Brown from BEAM, the Broadband Expansion and Accessibility of Mississippi, and Angel Stenmark she's the Grants Manager. So, Kyle, I guess you're recognized first, or you want to let ladies go first? Okay, Kyle, you're recognized.
Well, thank y'all for having us today. We appreciate the invitation. Commissioner Stamps has attended quite a few of our public meetings, so some of this presentation will look quite familiar to him. And so hopefully we'll, for his benefit, also give some updates on where we stand on some of our projects in his district. So giving everyone a little bit of history, and people like Ben Vance will remember this from back when Angel and I came from the public utility staff that oversaw the $75 million in CARES Act funding that was granted by the Mississippi State Legislature in 2020. 19 projects across the entire state, approximately 17,000 homes were connected using that $75 million in CARES Act money. And it was also matched dollar for dollar by the providers, so it ended up being a little over $150 million.
And just to add a little bit of context for this, in 2020, when we were awarded this money by the legislature, the fact was, and it still remains, that broadband is not a regulated public utility. So in my prior role at the public utility staff, I was the director of telecommunications. So it was my job to review all of the filings on behalf of the telecom providers in the state and make recommendations. You guys do the same thing that prior commissioners did. One thing that we didn't have visibility into or really any jurisdiction over was the speed at which broadband was expanded across the state. So when we had CARES Act funding, this was a unique opportunity for the legislature to try to help the state of Mississippi. So this was really our first foray into learning what it takes to stand up an application program, work with those providers in a different way, outside of what our reach typically had been. And it was really interesting. All right, go ahead.
And I think CD had left, but it was actually an opportunity to go to, he was referring to EMEPA, of taking a road show to the last meter at the last house right before the state line into Alabama. So we went from a 4-lane state highway to a 2-lane county road to a dirt road to a driveway to this house that was a mile off the road who now had fiber internet.
And we still talk about how one of the most impactful things that we saw on that same roadshow was a family-owned catfish restaurant in that same EMEPA jurisdiction that had never been able to run credit cards. So, you know, they had cash check only, but they were telling us as a result of being able to get service out to their restaurant, not only could they run a credit card processor, but they could actually run TVs to stream football games. So they had a different marketing opportunity and just a way to interact with the community in a new and different way.
Then came the Broadband Infrastructure Program, which actually we applied for when Angel and I were at Public Utilities, and it came from a need that the grant required a governmental partner. And through the CARES Act program, we actually got to know quite a few smaller ISPs around the state, and we got a phone call from an ISP up in Coahoma County, and they said, "We cannot find a governmental partner. Will you please be our governmental partner?" Originally, we said no, because we didn't really, we were tasked by the legislature to handle CARES Act. We weren't really the broadband office. We would just, the legislature says, here's where $75 million is going to go. We need y'all to get it out. That's what we did. And so we ended up at the last minute applying for the Broadband Infrastructure Program grant, which is a grant that never seems to go away, that we've now gone through 5 rescopes and 7 contract or time extensions because some of our providers have come in under budget. Well, instead of turning $1 million back into the legislature or back into the federal treasury, we've gone and we've asked for extensions and budget modifications so that way we can connect even more Mississippians with this federal funds. And so this slide actually, it's now 16 projects across the state with 6 providers, and with these 2 new projects, we're going to be getting close to 10,000 locations.
And
And s-
just for comparison, when we submitted this application, we had 7 providers that we partnered with for a total of 10 projects. So we have gone from 10 projects to 16, just being good stewards of that money and connecting more and more Mississippians.
And so most of the projects are nearing completion, except we have 2 that are in the environmental stage, and that's going to be a project down in Lincoln County and then one in Madison County. And then this is Angel's baby, and so I'm going to give her quite the time to do this. We've been in the process of getting $162 million in capital projects funds out the door. I'm actually going to let Angel give some of the specifics because we've had 2 waves of funding.
We have. So the Capital Projects Fund was really the onus for the state legislature, and knowing that the upcoming BEAD funding would be coming down the pike was the onus for setting up the actual BEAM office. So they realized a need for us to kind of coordinate all of those efforts throughout the state. So Capital Projects Fund was an initial allocation of $162 million, $162 million throughout the state of Mississippi for broadband expansion efforts. We had to submit our plan to Treasury. We have 2 funding mechanisms. One is for actual broadband infrastructure projects, which you expect is a traditional put the fiber on a pole in the ground, whatever, and connect a home. The second is what we call public Wi-Fi. So we have made awards in both of those funding programs so far. But we took a first round of applications in August of 2022. So our applications closed on August 15th, 2022. We reviewed those applications. 23, sorry. We reviewed those applications per the BEAM Act. We did put those out for comment and objection for a period of 30 days so that we could take public comment on those. And we are rapidly working through getting all of those initial projects executed grant agreements. And actually 2 of our team members from the BEAM team are at a groundbreaking today in Madison County for one of our CPF awards. So we are happy to say that there are several projects that have been completed. We have just over $100 million, I believe, that has been obligated so far. So we do not necessarily have a signed and duly executed grant agreement from each awardee for those projects, but we are in those final stages of getting everything squared away and signed. We did open a second round of broadband infrastructure applications this year. That is what is currently open for comment and objection on our BEAM website. Those projects are, okay, so CPF round 1, it was right at $102 million, 38 projects, 13 providers. And it looks like we'll connect just over 40,000, approximately 42,000 homes. You can see that there is quite a disparate area across the state impacted by those CPF awards. These are our CPF Round 2 projects. They are, like I said, open for comment and objection until December 23rd. I was going to say just over $30 million, so I'm glad that that is correct. For 12 new projects, it'll connect an additional 9,100 homes. I'll stop there if you have anything to add for that. So our next funding program will be more of Kyle's wheelhouse, so I'm going to turn the microphone back over to him, but that's our BEAD funding.
And so don't let the 1.2 billion number on the screen fool you. That is not just sitting in a checking account waiting for us to draw down. That this has actually been a multi-year process to where our office had to go around and have community engagement events and create a 5-year plan of how we were going to connect everyone in the state. And then the next phase was what we called BEAD Volume 1, which was our residential challenge process, which was when people had the opportunity to, if a company was saying that they provided you service and they didn't provide you service, that challenge process gave you an opportunity to say, no, you did not. We have now ended that challenge process for the initial proposal Volume 1, and we have those results are pending with the NTIA, which we had to go through. We had a company do adjudication, so that way it wasn't us.
What's the acronym? NTIA?
National Telecommunications and Information Administration.
Gotcha. Okay.
Sorry, we all grow up in a world of acronyms.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. And so we are awaiting NTIA to tell us whether or not those challenges are accepted. And so while that was going on, we were doing our volume 2. And so volume 2 was getting a step towards how are we actually going to connect everyone. And then once the challenge process results have been finalized, then we will have until August of 25 to actually come up with a plan that we will have to then submit back to the federal government to say, this is how we plan on connecting everyone. And so part of that is going painstakingly house by house, address by address, and looking at some specific areas where alternative technologies, because, what is it? If you go across the Mississippi River from Myersville, I don't know if everybody knows where Myersville is, but it's in Issaquena County up in the Mississippi Delta. If you go right across from Myersville, there are about 20 houses that as the Mississippi River changed over time, you have 20 residences that are actually geographically attached to Louisiana and not Mississippi. And so being sure that, laying fiber may not be the most cost-effective method to get people connected to the internet in locations like that, because, permits, time, all of those types of things. So here's some upcoming tentative deadlines. We are currently in our letter of intent process. That actually closes on the 13th. For any internet provider to be eligible to apply for BEAD funding, they have to complete the letter of intent process. And so we put out a letter of intent guide 45 days before the window even opened, so that way all of our internet companies would actually know specifically what was going to be required in the letter of intent process. And so the goal is to open the application window first or second week of January. We are working very aggressively on getting that process done, because the letter of intent is more financial, to where we can evaluate whether or not a company has the means. And I see Michael snuck back in here from AT&T, to where if an AT&T applies for every district in Mississippi, and I forgot to mention, our baseline is supervisor districts, because what we have learned is supervisors have a tendency to be connected to the locals. They're elected officials, they're out campaigning, they're out talking to people, and also in certain places, they can help when you start getting to permitting. Or when you have, in some counties, we've experienced this in Lincoln County, where a lot of people utilities don't have easements, because most people are on private wells, private septic tanks, stuff like that. And so supervisors and other elected officials are beneficial if, Miss Nancy's in the hospital and she, who can we get to her to get an easement, so that way we can get infrastructure to people's houses. And so the final proposal, which will have our plan to connect to every Mississippian, is going to be submitted, has to be submitted by August 25th. And so what we will end up doing is, looking at our areas of the state that
So the purpose of the letter of intent process is twofold. So like Kyle was saying, it is first for us to have an initial gating to make sure that if someone is intending to apply for BEAD funding, that they do have the financial wherewithal, they have the managerial experience, that they are in fact an actual company, they do exist. But the second thing in the letter of intent process is we're asking to gauge interest on what portions of the state, what project areas might your organization be interested in applying for. So we have 82 counties in Mississippi. That translates into 410 supervisor districts throughout the state. So we listed all 410 of those project areas, and we ask each company that submits a letter of intent to list which project areas they might apply for. The intention is that if you don't express interest, then we assume you don't want to apply for it, and unless there's a very compelling reason, will not be allowed to apply for that area. So once we get past the deadline of this Friday for a letter of intent, then we in the Beam office, along with our partners that we've hired to help us with these things, can evaluate, okay, there are 410 project areas in the state of Mississippi, but there are only 150 that everybody wants to apply for. What about the other 260 project areas in the state of Mississippi? Because we know that it is our responsibility to make sure that broadband does reach every one of those.
Yeah, and one other thing that we've been looking at as we've been, I kind of call it, analyzing all the supervisor districts, is also taking notice of bodies of water, rivers, railroads, because we've also run into certain projects on our BIP grant that some of that, what we kind of call reduced administrative burden on providers is, sometimes trying to get a national forest permit can take 6 months. And so we're doing analysis on supervisor districts to see where are major railroad tracks, to where we can say, to where a railroad can be a burden to get a permit for. And so looking at that and making sure that if one part of a supervisor district, just say, is $75,000 per customer, can we merge that supervisor district with?
Mr. CD, you okay? AT&T can help you. Sorry.
No, CD may be applying for some of our digital skills grants. That'll be coming out next
I think
year.
you spurred him to do it right quick. So.
Well, it's very important that we get our senior citizens connected and knowledgeable on how to use technology.
Now, CD cannot have all 10 million of the digital skills funding, but I do actually want to. We have some people that are in the process of training on some AI, and I said, "Can I sign up for that class?" Because I'm kind of a no chat GPT kind of person. But so those are some of the things that we've been looking at. Going back to some of our districts and zones, is what are some areas, and I was using that Issaquah County as an example, that those 20 houses are what we would call like extremely high cost. And so, using our friends at AT&T, if AT&T gets the rest of, the Myersville Supervisor District, if they wanted to come back and say, well, we won't do fiber to those 20 locations, but we will do a microwave shot, like an antenna on a tower,
Land bridge.
and then beam it across the river, and then do fiber from that tower to those 20 locations. And so that way we can actually work with the ISPs on some of those extremely high cost locations, to where that way we can make sure that they do get internet. And then other things that we've been working with is cooperation with 811. We've actually been putting those in all of our grant agreements, and we actually worked with our providers on the language to make sure that they were okay with it. And I believe Michael and AT&T and all of our other ISPs were very comfortable with that, to where it does actually include having pre-construction meetings with locals. And I believe 811 now actually has a ticket in their system for a pre-construction meeting, because in a lot of areas, having the local utilities there with the ISPs as they're going through, especially in more urban areas, helps alleviate, damage to gas lines and stuff like that.
Amen.
811, call before you dig.
And so working through missing addresses, I know our electric companies have been very helpful every time we've asked for addresses to make sure, because, and Angel can probably speak to this, is there's almost a 1-year lag of when an ISP connects a customer to when it actually shows up on the FCC, Federal Communications Commission map. And so what we've done is worked with our electric companies to actually get their residential meters to make sure that we don't have any missing addresses, because we would rather it be a chicken house or a bale of hay and not a house that gets missed and doesn't get broadband. And then, I kind of already addressed the extremely high cost locations. It's being cognizant of those.
But the chicken houses need broadband too, because you can automate that thing.
Right.
If it has broadband. So there's an economic development component to bringing broadband to a chicken house.
And so just making sure that we don't have any missing addresses, so that way nobody gets left behind. And then I've already kind of covered the extremely high-cost locations.
So that's a high-level overview of what the main broadband funding and streams that we have in the Beam office. So I guess we will stop and take questions if you have any.
Commissioner Stamps?
Well, first, I appreciate you covered my number one question for Beam is well, first off, the engagement that you've gone through over the years and standing up a whole agency and informing the public of the utilization of the agency has been commendable. And it's been a joy to work with you. Our team has worked with you on several projects and several community meetings, and I appreciate your thoroughness and attention to detail, and also sensitivity to our constituents. Because sometimes folks show up to these town hall meetings and expect things to happen tomorrow, and that's just not the case. But you inform them in a delicate way that they can understand, and I appreciate that.
And I will add, Katie Funderburk, who's our operations director,
Mhm.
she probably has one of the toughest jobs in city government of having to tell people all the time, when am I going to get internet? And I actually asked her in her interview, because I said, how good are you at telling people bad news?
That's right.
Because in some situations, she does have to say, it may be till 2028. You know, I may be dead by then. We can't make anything move faster.
But we're trying.
Which brings me to Oklahoma. When are we going to deploy anything in Oklahoma?
I will be curious to see what happens through the letter of intent process, because we've actually done quite a bit of analysis that there is, using kind of a cost modeling. If you look at Oklahoma based on supervisor districts, there is about 20 locations in South Lee County that actually pull the cost way high. And so that would be a situation, I believe it's Lee 4 is the supervisor district, that merging that Lee 4 with like a Clay County supervisor district, and that way the cost is more equal. But I will be very curious, and I will let you know on how Oklahoma shakes out.
Thank you. I know it's one of the few kind of dark spots in our northern region there in Holly Springs. So any update on Holly Springs?
Holly Springs, Michael and CD can tell you that part of Marshall County is in pending litigation in front of Hinds County Chancery Court. I believe I think we go back to court on the 19th, and that will cover about half of Marshall County. And then I've actually talked to our buddy Bill about, in New Albany, about potentially getting Ace Fiber to look at their natural gas customers and expanding just from their electric territory to also include part of their natural gas territory, which would start getting a lot of that Marshall County stuff covered.
And I know they look, Ace Fiber partnering with New Albany Electric.
With us.
Do what?
They're also in the lawsuit with us.
Yeah. So I know they were working with Blue Mountain. Was that's completed and deployed, right? Or close? Or is that pending in the lawsuit?
That's pending in the
But
Okay.
they've already started.
Okay.
So they finished Blue Mountain, then they were heading to Blue Springs, then the town of New Albany, and then up towards Myrtle.
And just so everybody listening knows what's going on, and the legislature would not allow municipalities to participate, and so cities like New Albany got very, I guess through help with y'all, or working with you, because I know Kyle knows Bill Maddox real well, that they worked out a system to where they can partner with a local EPA in another county even to come in and help serve their customers and constituents. So I commend that, thinking outside the box and getting that broadband deployed where it couldn't be. And so that's encouraging, not only in New Albany, but Blue Mountain and possibly Holly Springs coming. So.
And then you've got
in Oklahoma, sorry.
Yeah, and then you've got one little challenging area in Tisch County on the north side of the lake.
Correct. Yeah, it's similar to the Mississippi River thing. Yes,
correct.
It's on the other side of the lake.
Yeah, so you have to get through Tennessee to
I think
access.
there's a few Alabama customers on our side too, or Alabama constituents on our side too, I think. So.
And then you've got one co-op out of Tennessee that covers a portion up there too.
So it's a exciting time as we deploy broadband. So thank y'all so much for coming and explaining what you do and kind of informing us. Yes, sir.
Let me ask one more question. In the Delta, in Mount Bayou, how are we coming with working through that complex issue of providing broadband in Mount Bayou? They had a previous contract with a provider, a legacy deal that's been in place for a long time, and they were not able to apply for, was it RDOF funds, and couldn't use Beam. It was kind of a conflict there. Where are we?
I do know that there is a USDA Reconnect grant that was awarded to Mountain Bayou Telephone that covers a lot of the outside portions of Mountain Bayou. But then what Angel was talking about Capital Projects Fund, we actually just awarded Mountain Bayou Telephone a grant to actually do public Wi-Fi at 4 locations inside Mountain Bayou proper. And so one's at the Housing Authority, one's at the hospital, one's at City Hall, and then one is at the African American History Museum.
Could you get that information to Ms. Rollins so we can go back up there and check on that?
And then in the second round, and so Angel kind of knows this. I'm pretty good at just remembering facts and figures. And so on the public Wi-Fi, we made awards to Aristotle for 2 locations in Tunica County, at the Civic Center, and then I forgot the other location. We also made an award to Aristotle in the town of Satartia. Then it was the 4 locations in Mountain Bayou. We awarded money to Mac South for Oxford, the Oxford Park, the city of Starkville, and the town of Ripley. Did I miss anybody?
There was a question came in via text. How do you, are the contractors that you choose, is that a competitive bid process?
Which contractors?
We don't hire contractors to do the installation or any of the fiber build out. That is, we facilitate grant programs to administer funding to ISPs throughout the state.
Okay.
And each grant comes with some different requirements. And so like the BIP grant actually required people to go out for public procurement, post things on their website. We also shared them on our website. So I think Franklin Telephone has a bid out right now either for engineering services or construction services. And that is one thing that one of the kind of the benefits of that BIP grant and doing public procurement was some of these projects actually came in under budget, which is why we were able to go from, it started at 10 projects and we ended up at 16.
Just to kind of go through that process, so obviously Beam just takes applications and then it is approved through the process in the federal government standards and guidelines. And then it's awarded based on those.
Yeah, and then like for CPF, public procurement was waived. And so that way, you know, AT&T can go out and solicit to, you know, whoever they've used in the past. And
okay. Any other questions, Commissioner Stamps? Thank y'all so much for coming and for what you do for our state. And yeah, just keep me posted on obviously Holly Springs and Okolona and that area in Tisch County.
you got it.
Okay. Thank y'all. Appreciate it.
Thank you very much. How's Ryan?
Okay. Next, we have on the agenda Jessica Jasper with the Attorney General's Office to address the no call. Of course, Commissioner Stamps and I were both in the House when we voted to transfer it. So, but before we knew we would be here, so it's interesting to figure out.
Well, we both knew we would be here. We just didn't want to deal with that. We wanted to deal with this.
So thank you for being here and for kind of explaining the process of how y'all are handling it and what our citizens can do to try to stop those pesky calls.
Yes.
Thank you for joining us.
Awesome. Okay. Well, I'm so grateful to be here. Thank you so much for inviting the AG's office to come and speak. I'm Jessica Jasper. I'm a special assistant AG. Among other subject matters, one of the things that I'm responsible for handling is telemarketing enforcement and the no-call portal. And we do, obviously, enforcement and prosecution of bad actors in the telemarketing space in this state. So in order to understand what the no-call portal is, I think it's important that we understand what the no-call laws are. The no-call laws come from the Mississippi Telephone Solicitation Act, the MTSA. The MTSA is the law that governs telemarketing activities in Mississippi. Although technically the original law, the unsolicited residential telephonic sales rule, is still on the books and we still can enforce that law. The MTSA establishes the no-call initiative, relevant definitions. It outlines requirements for telemarketer registrations in the state. It carves out exemptions and exceptions for certain types of solicitations, so certain types of phone calls and certain types of telemarketers. We'll talk about that in a minute. It provides penalties and injunctive relief for violations, and as of July 1st, 2023, it grants the enforcement authority to the Mississippi Attorney General's office. There are also federal telemarketing laws and regulations that we can enforce under the MTSA. So the foundation of no-call enforcement is the national registry. So there's national registry that consumers put their phone number in, and that is how telemarketers know that you do not want to be called by them. This registry is maintained and published by the Federal Trade Commission. It's not a Mississippi registry. We used to have one, but it was a little bit duplicative, and so now all of Mississippi's registrations are incorporated into the federal registry. Under the MTSA, solicitors must obtain a copy of the registry before they can begin telemarketing activities in Mississippi. Again, so telemarketers know that you don't want to call them. It creates a fair playing field for both sides. Failure to register is a violation of the law under the MTSA and carries a penalty of $10,000 per violation. So to register, you would go to this site, which is, again, the Federal Trade Commission site. This is the National Do Not Call Registry. The FTC updates this list every 30 days and publishes it to telemarketers. It serves as a guideline, putting consumers on notice of who they cannot call, and it also serves as legal protection for consumers. It's the basis of our enforcement because the MTSA does require you to be registered on this registry in order for us to initiate an enforcement. As with almost any rule or law, there are exemptions and exceptions. This is a list of telemarketers who are not required to register under the law. So if you fall in one of these categories, you are not required to, you're not held to the MTSA's requirements and standards. Since they are not subject to registration requirements, they're not subject to any of the MTSA's restrictions. There are also political calls are covered. So if you're calling on behalf of a politician, that would also fall in this list. As of July of this year, there was a recent amendment that adjusted the insurance agent exemption, specifically related to Medicare supplements, policies, or certificates. So if you're an insurance agent, normally you're exempted from the requirements of the MTSA. However, if you're calling specifically regarding Medicare supplements, policies, or certificates, you are no longer considered to be part of that exemption, so you do have to register and you do have to follow the requirements of the MTSA. There are also a few types of call exceptions. So if the type of call falls within one of these categories, it's considered outside of the scope of the MTSA. So if you're calling as a part of an established business relationship, that's a 6-month time frame. So if I was a customer of yours within the last 6 months, they can still call me, and that's not considered a violation of the MTSA. If you're calling on behalf of a bona fide corporation or a bona fide religious or charitable charity, then that also, those types of calls do not fall within the MTSA. So how does a telemarketer become registered in Mississippi? These are the requirements to become a telemarketer. They are pretty stringent, but that's to ensure that the telemarketers that we are allowing to conduct telemarketing activities in the state are vetted. They are legitimate companies. They have good policies in place and procedures in place to not harass consumers. And if you'll notice at the bottom, it says FTC confirmation of national DNC registry subscription. So telemarketers actually have to go to the FTC website, and they have to become registered with the FTC, and then they provide that FTC number to the Attorney General's office as part of their registration. And telemarketers must renew their registration with the Mississippi Attorney General's office every year. So we will reevaluate if they've made any changes to their sales scripts or any written materials that are sent to consumers, that are received by consumers. We'll reevaluate all of that information. So all the things that I've been talking about are all available through our online no-call portal. This is the actual portal. That's the website address right there, nocallportal.ago.ms.gov. Once you create an account as a telemarketer, you will be able to log back into that account to do your renewals every year. It will all be located in one place for you to come and manage all of your documents. This is also where all of our complaints are regarding telemarketing are put into our system. So this is an overview of our investigations. Consumer complaints are where most of our investigations begin. Again, they all come through that online portal. Arlissa Smith in our office, she is the consumer complaint intake person for telemarketing. So once we receive the complaint, we'll do kind of an initial review. We'll possibly talk to the consumer, get a little bit more information if we don't have enough information. We will run some checks in law enforcement databases. We'll do Google searches, general like OSINT type intelligence collection. And then once we have sufficient information to do a traceback, we partner with the Industry Traceback Group, which is a private organization that works specifically for law enforcement, providing information regarding calls, call data, call origination, all that information. We will send a subpoena to ITG to get more information after the traceback is collected. We'll get all the details, particularly if we have determined that the originating caller is a United States business or a United States entity. And then we'll send a subpoena to that entity. So once we determine where the call originated, I will send a subpoena and I'll say, hey, I would like more information about this particular call. And then once I've identified the originating caller, I will also send a notice of alleged violation, which is a statement basically saying, hey, we think that you violated the law. Can you please provide a justification? Do you fall into an exemption? Do you have an exception to the MTSA's requirements? We do notice that you are not registered with our office, or if you are registered, is your renewal up to date, things like that. We'll provide the entity an opportunity to respond, to provide that justification in a reasonable amount of time. Sometimes they respond, sometimes they don't. And then we have the option to initiate enforcement action in civil court and pursue the monetary and injunctive relief that the MTSA allows. And again, that is $10,000 per violation. So one phone call could be multiple violations of the MTSA. So adds up pretty fast with just one phone call. So this is kind of a snapshot of our telemarketing complaints over the last year, almost 7,000 complaints. It's roughly almost 600 a month, I think. Currently, we're seeing trends for several different types of telemarketing, robocall, scam campaigns, particularly one of the ones that is most interesting to me personally is we're seeing business number spoofing. So businesses across Mississippi are having their phone number spoofed by these scammers, and they're calling actual customers of the business. And they're pretending to be, their insurance agent, or they're pretending to be in Illinois. They were actually pretending to be the Illinois AG's office. There are also real estate scams. Scammers are getting information about your house, your property online, and then they are calling you, pretending to want to buy your house to get more information from you so that they can scam you like that. We're also seeing Medicare and health insurance-related robocalls a lot. I think a lot of this has to do with the fact that in July of this year, we just carved out that exemption. And so some of those callers that are not robocallers may not have realized that that law has changed. Additionally, the AG's office, outside of handling individual complaints that come into our office and pursuing the telemarketers behind those complaints, we are regularly commenting on federal rules, federal changes that are proposed by the FTC or the FCC. We are working with other state AG's offices. One of the things that is notable that we just joined a comment in one of our multi-state litigation task forces regarding the RMD updates that was published by the FCC. The RMD is the robocall mitigation database, and that is a database where all the robocallers across the country are supposed to register prior to initiating any robocalls in the country. Previously, there were a lot of loopholes with this database. There were a lot of kind of checkbox, checklist registration requirements that were not vetted properly. And so the FCC proposed a significant amount of changes to that database to help block some of these bad actor robocallers in the country and prevent them from operating in our networks. We're also involved in Avid Telecom multi-state litigation. Avid Telecom is a very large telecom provider. There were over 200 tracebacks initiated against Avid Telecom's phone numbers. We're also involved in Identidad multi-state litigation. The AG's office actually published a press release about this one not too long ago. Identidad Telecom is been connected to those business number spoofing incidents that we've seen nationwide. We're also coordinating with, as I mentioned earlier, with other state AG's offices. So we're part of the Anti-Robocall Multi-State Litigation Task Force. We're also part of the National Association of Attorneys General Do Not Call working group, as well as the Anti-Robocall Technologies working group. Lots of working groups. But we focus on different either cases, telemarketers, bad actors that we know are in the space, or just various ways, like such as the RMD, where we can improve the infrastructure and improve the system overall so that these calls can be prevented from getting to our consumers. So these are some best practices that we offer to avoid scams. So be careful who you provide your phone number to. Don't put your phone number into sketchy websites. Don't hand them out to people that you don't know personally or that you know is not a connection of someone that you know. Don't answer calls from unknown numbers. I know sometimes that's difficult, especially if you use your personal phone for work. But if it says scam or telemarketer, it probably is one. So you can probably avoid answering that call. Most of the time, if it's someone that you know, they'll leave a voicemail and you can call them back. Don't press a button to speak to an operator, because that just further facilitates the fact that this is a working number, this is a live person on the other side of this phone number, and your data will be shared by that telemarketer to other telemarketers, and you will receive an influx of more calls. Don't try to negotiate your name off the call list. Same thing, I see a lot of complaints from consumers who say, I tried to convince them to take my name off the list. I asked them repeatedly. I always answer the phone and ask them to take my name off the list. Again, the more that you answer the phone, the more they're going to, it just solidifies that your number is working and the more they're going to call you. Utilize phone carrier call blocking filters. So some of the carriers, some providers actually have options to help block telemarketing and spam calls. And you can actually go to your provider's website and you can pay for a subscription, or you can get that added to your plan. And then I always advise that you block each telemarketer's phone number, because the more numbers that you block, they'll think that your number's not working and then they'll stop calling you. Because one of the tricks is often change the last four numbers or change the last number of the telephone number and then, keep calling you from a different number. So the more numbers that you can block, the better, even though that might be obnoxious. And then you can always forward spam text to 7726 if you receive those. And this is my information. If you have any questions or would like to contact me, please do so. Any questions?
Great, good job. Thank you for the thorough explanation of how it works. Commissioner Stamps?
That was one of the bills that I was appreciative to get through the House and Senate because the AG's office is much more capable and with the powers that you have to prosecute
Yes.
than the Public Service Commission was ever able to do. So I appreciate your hard work and tell Attorney General Finch we appreciate her dedication and putting competent people in place to affect the change that Mississippians need.
Yes, sir. Thank you. Appreciate
Yeah, that was obviously came through when Commissioner Stamps and I were in the legislature, and it did make much more sense to be under the AG because y'all have a little bigger stick than the Public Service Commission. So get a subpoena from Attorney General, then it scares people a little more than from the Public Service Commission. I do have a few questions.
Okay.
The when it shows spam on your phone,
Yes.
or telemarketer, is that because they're on that number's registered on the no-call list, or what triggers that?
So I think that's actually, it might be a provider implemented notification. So the no-call registry would be your phone number. So if your phone number is on the no-call registry, then telemarketers should know not to call you. But that little notification on the call, it should be a provider label.
And last question I have is, in enforcement, a lot of these spam calls originate from out of the country.
Yes.
So it's very hard to prosecute.
Correct.
But is there any way to prosecute once they do answer the phone, they transfer that call or that phishing call to an American company?
Yes,
So obviously those companies are paying for that service.
correct.
So is there any way to go after those American-based companies that are benefiting from the phishing calls from overseas?
Yes. So once we identify through the traceback process, through the ITG process, once we identify the originating caller, we will know whether or not the person who made that call, or if the call was transferred to someone in the United States, we'll know where the call landed, and we'll know who was talking to the consumer that reported this incident. And so we can send a subpoena and a NAV to that particular entity, and we can pursue it that way.
What kind of success rate do you have with that, do you know?
So I can't give you a number off the top of my head, but we have pretty good responses on NAVs. Normally when we send those, people, we encourage telemarketers to send them, and we send them almost in a friendly but enforcing manner. It's for their benefit and for our benefit to understand exactly, what is the nature of the phone call, and is there some sort of situation that we need to know about, and if not, we can pursue. So we have a pretty good success rate with getting responses from businesses when we send out a NAV.
What's the acronym NAV?
Notice of alleged violation.
Okay,
Sorry.
thank you.
And one last question.
Yes, sir.
What are we doing for artificial intelligence generated voices in robocalls? For instance, AI is advancing so fast now that people could use your daughter's voice to call you and respond to you in a conversation using AI, and you would think that my daughter's in jail.
Try to Venmo her money. Yeah.
And so forth. How do you navigate that and hold folks accountable for using those kinds of practices?
So this is actually a subject of discussion in not only our anti-robocall task force group, but also data privacy and data breach. I also serve as the data privacy and data breach attorney for the AG's office, and we've been talking about AI generally and its misuses against consumers, and I think that particular issue falls kind of in between the telecom space and the data privacy space, because you are stealing someone's voice and someone's information to facilitate these calls. And so that is one of those issues that I think it crosses borders into both into both categories, and it's also like a general consumer protection issue. And so we would approach it from various standpoints. It would be a multi-violation. And so we still approach them from the same direction of step one, step two, and so forth, of identifying the target and prosecuting under telemarketing laws. And then once we get to that point, we will incorporate, violations of consumer protection generally, or of data privacy or data breach concerns.
Okay, thank you very much.
Yes, sir.
Thank you for your presentation, and tell AG Fitch, keep up the good work over there.
I will.
Thanks
Thank you so much.
Thank you for your presentation. Next, we are ahead of schedule, but I think Josh anticipated that. So AWS is going to come on at in 5 minutes. I think IT needs 5 minutes to get it keyed up. Y'all let us know when y'all are ready.
Oh, she's virtual.
Hi, everyone. Can you hear me?
Hello, how are you?
Yeah, can you hear us?
Yes, I'm sorry. I was waiting for the cue from Marcia.
Thank you so much.
Nice.
Thank you for
Yeah.
joining us. If you're ready, we'll go and get started.
Sure.
Okay. We have joining
Go-
us Aaron McKinney, Principal Policy Counsel for AWS State, Local, and Education Public Policy. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me, and good afternoon to the other commission members as well. I appreciate the introduction. That cuts down on my first slide here. But just to add to your introduction, I would like to share that my role on the AWS Public Policy team is mainly focused on monitoring state legislation this year and years past and what's to come as it relates to artificial intelligence and other emerging technologies. I've been focused on a lot of internal and external educating and provision of guidance and other information to folks like you all and customers about AI technologies and how regulation and guidance issued in the states may impact their businesses. So I'm excited to be here today. Okay, so just want to double check. You can all see my slides.
Yes.
Great. Okay. So just very quickly wanted to give you like an overview of what I'm going to talk about today and how this is going to go. I know that the meeting here today is focused on telecommunications and your work. So I wanted to sort of tailor that and provide some very specific information as to what's going on in the AI space with the telco industry. But to start, I wanted to give you just like a quick AI 101. What do the terms mean that you're probably hearing in the news and in your work? Then go through some of the use cases that we're seeing public sector customers use, the telco industry use, and hopefully provide some real world knowledge of what's going on for you all to inform your work. I'm going to share a video with you in a couple slides that is a conversation from an event we were at earlier this year, discussing how AI and generative AI are being integrated into telecommunications companies' work and, some of the back-end infrastructure that you all are probably very familiar with, and hopefully give you a little bit more context on that area. And then I'm going to talk a little bit about the regulatory landscape. And by that, I mean not just legislation, but other forms of guidance that we're seeing in the states, domestically in general, worldwide. We have international standards being discussed and determined. We have different sorts of regulation being considered and introduced. So I wanted to give you sort of a high level of what's going on there. And then just talk a little bit about what AWS thinks about AI policy development and what that can mean. And then hopefully have time for some questions after a final video from an executive at Cox Communications who can give you another quick bit of an example as to how they're using one of our AI machine learning services in their work. Okay. And please do interrupt me at any point. I can't see or hear anyone in the room, but I can hear you. So please feel free to interrupt if you have any questions. Okay, so AI 101. I like this slide a lot. It gives sort of a hierarchy of the different terms that we see and we talk about all the time in industry with regard to artificial intelligence. Just as an overarching umbrella, I like to say that artificial intelligence is not just one technology, but a group of technologies. And the artificial intelligence has become a way to describe really any system that can mimic or replicate tasks that are previously or usually required to be executed with human intelligence. Artificial intelligence is not new. The term was coined in the 50s. There's been a lot of fits and starts since the term was introduced. A lot of new technologies have emerged. One of them is machine learning, which is a subset of AI. And this technology basically uses large amounts of data to determine patterns and make logical predictions based on the data. Then, you've obviously heard about generative AI, which is relatively new to the scene and probably most apparent as of November 2022 when ChatGPT 4 hit the scene and consumers had direct access to this generative AI technology, which in its most simplest explanation is basically the use of artificial intelligence that encompasses large amounts of data. That data is provided to a large language model, which is what we call trained on these large amounts of data in order to produce and generate new items and technologies and things like reports and coding and video. The generative AI name actually comes from the fact that it is generating new and novel content. So that's a very, very brief overview. There are lots of other subsets of AI that will probably become more of a visible part of the lexicon as we go forward. But wanted to give you sort of a high level of the most utilized terms, and in particular generative AI, because that's what we're seeing from telco customers and state agencies in terms of like where they're making the most advances in using this technology. But you can imagine, and you've probably read that artificial intelligence, has the capacity to really make some game-changing, evolution in terms of productivity and performance and employees' work and tackling, some of the biggest problems we've seen or are seeing in humanity. So, okay, so I also really like this slide because it gives you really like a pretty broad picture of how organizations and in particular state agencies and organizations that are, not the typical like private sector industry type of customer. This is how public sector customers are using generative AI today, and certainly how our customers are using it. I think it's important too because when we hear this term AI, you're thinking probably of what you've seen in the news, whether it's ChatGPT or drones or driverless cars. But it doesn't, those news reports don't always tell you the full story of how these technologies are being utilized in really critical ways by our public sector customers. One stat that, tends to be pretty impactful is that experts are forecasting that AI-driven productivity at both the public and private sector levels could increase our global GDP by 16% by 2030. Given we're on the eve of 2025, I think that is very close. And we've seen what can happen in just 2 years since folks really started talking about AI a lot more. So I think that number will probably increase. But wanted to, give you some of these highlights. They're fairly self-explanatory, but I like to point out some of my favorite ones, like traffic optimization. That can mean like how data engineers for state agencies are doing traffic counts and could easily do that with a machine versus an officer or human. They can predict traffic patterns through this data collection. I think it's really cool. Public safety and crime prevention is another one. Generative AI is helping analyze data from all sorts of sources. And surveillance cameras, the CAD systems, body cameras, these are all helping law enforcement, enforce different routes that they need to follow and preventing crimes and, promoting overall public safety. I've been really fascinated by the case this week as the New York City Police Department and other state agencies were trying to track down the person of interest who basically committed a very heinous act in New York City with the United Healthcare executive's death, and was very interested to see how some of those cameras and pictures were pieced together, and obviously with the help of human intervention as well, have helped them apprehend the suspect. So just some examples there, but wanted to talk through a few of them, and of course we can talk through more of them at the end of it if you have any questions. Next, I wanted to show you this video that I alluded to, just to kind of set it up. This is a conversation between Dean Ramsey, who's a principal analyst at TM, and our head of global business development. His name is Samir Viewer, and he works specifically with telco customers and implementing AI and generative AI in the telecom space. They had this conversation earlier this year at an event, and I thought it would give you guys some context as to what we're hearing from our telecom customers and how they're looking to understand and integrate AI into their work. Sorry about that.
See the video, no sound yet. Technical difficulties, hold on.
Can you all hear the video? I thought I heard someone say something, so I wanted to pause for a minute.
Yeah, we don't have volume yet, sound on the video. We're trying to get it up.
Okay. I can switch for a minute.
You see Luke on the screen?
This works. I'm just going to pause to make sure. Can you all hear that?
We cannot. No volume. How long is the video?
I'm trying to think, if I drop the link in the chat, do you think, Martha, you would be able to pull it up?
Martha, what do you think? You can try it.
Sorry about that.
Worst case scenario, if it's a short video, we can see closed captioning, so we can read it.
It's actually, kind of long. It's about 8 minutes. So, if
In the chat,
you're
we'll
not,
run it this way.
okay, cool. If you're not able to pull it up, I can move on and you can watch it at your leisure.
Got it.
Hi everyone, I'm Dean
Okay,
Ramsey, I'm
great.
Principal Analyst at TM Forum. I'm here at Mobile World Congress 2024. I'm joined by Samir from AWS. Are you having a good week at the show?
I am, Dean. Thank you so much. It's, I think, my 12th MWC.
I think it's my 12th too.
Is it? Okay. All right.
It seems busier than ever.
It has been, especially since the first one I came to 3 years ago after COVID was really dry. But yeah, the show's been really interesting. For us, there's been a lot of experimentation on the AI front, especially on the Gen AI front. There's been a lot of scaling announcements on cloudifying the networks themselves, and then transforming how telcos go to market on the cloud and with the cloud. So those are the three primary themes that I think we're saying. Just to recap: experimentation on Gen AI, scaling of the networks, and then real monetization of the cloud through the telcos.
Great. So AI is obviously the big theme out there on the show floor. It's the big theme of our upcoming research report. When you're talking to operators, how are you seeing that journey towards implementing AI, be it machine learning or predictive classical AI or Gen AI? How are you seeing that journey panning out?
I'm glad you actually laid out all the continuum of AI, because Gen AI seems to have become this panacea word for everything. And so it's much more nuanced than that, as you know. So if I look at the single biggest ask from my customers in the telco domain, they are asking for two things, which is help me streamline my operations using AI, and help me generate new revenue using AI. And if I had to add a third, actually, help me remake the consumer experience through AI. So cost side, revenue side, and just the NPS side of things. So we're working with virtually every operator on multiple Gen AI focused experiments, but actually implementing real AI in the field, especially in the area of network operations. We're seeing a large interest and actual implementations taking place right now. And we can then start to monitor what the improvement is in both velocity and as well as cost savings. And we're capturing that data right now. And then on the consumer side, it is Gen AI to the fore. With a lot of customer service improvements happening. And then finally, I guess we're starting to see AI pervade the network as well. We're showing a lot of RAN intelligence using AI here. And so, for example, with T-Mobile, their RAN optimization, we're showing that out on the floor today. So it's finally happening. In the network itself.
So as you said, AI has been around in our industry for a decade, maybe more. But the launch of ChatGPT 15, 16 months ago triggered this fixation with Gen AI. And it kind of, it's brought the whole conversation to the fore. And I suppose over the last year, since we were here in Barcelona last year, there seems to have been quite a bit of progress. I'm hearing more pragmatism and practicality coming into those conversations from the operators. What are you hearing in terms of the challenges that they're facing when they think about their AI strategy more broadly?
So let me address the Gen AI component first and what we're doing there. On Gen AI, we view the Gen AI as 3 layers. You really need the best performant infrastructure out there. And so we're addressing that with what we call Inferentia and Trainium, which is our homegrown chipset based on the ARM architecture. And we are helping telcos train models on their data and make a custom model for themselves to use at 40% of the cost of comparable instances. But we're also giving them choice with the latest NVIDIA instances, Intel instances, and so on. So that's the layer. And if you read the press, you'll hear a lot about supply chain constraints and so on. So on the cloud, it's available, and they're starting to use it in the cloud for Gen AI. They've always been using it, of course, for what I call the more traditional AI. The second layer that we're really looking at is basically a platform as a service for Gen AI, because our philosophy has always been about choice. And in this particular case, we are actually working with multiple large language model vendors and other types of models vendors to actually list them on a managed service we call Bedrock, where you can actually consume these models through an API. And you know that it is already safeguarded, it's already been vetted, the guardrails are in place, and we provide all the metrics around that. And then finally, we launched a lot of applications on top, one of them being Q, which is the ability to build an application very, very easily that utilizes all of the underlying infrastructure and the managed service, so that you can do things like Code Whisperer, which is basically code generation, code modification, code migration, very easily, chatbots, contact centers with our Amazon Connect approach. So we're seeing adoption at various different places across the telcos. Some are building their own LLMs.
Yes.
Right. Some are using advanced RAG techniques to basically customize the responses back. But what really excites me is there are now starting to be real use cases in the industry. I alluded to the RAN use case, but we're starting to see in the areas of RFP generation, where telcos have hundreds of RFPs they respond to every week. And you can now automate a vast degree of that by feeding it with a corpus of what's been successful in the past, what's been unsuccessful, and allow a human to make that judgment at the end of it. Then we're also starting to see Gen AI being used in network operations, where you can query the network itself and say, give me potential failure points. And it'll actually give you that.
Yeah,
so you can
predictive analysis on the network.
And I could go on and on. This is a year of experimentation in the first half of the year, is my judgment, but we will see these go into production in the second half.
So a very multifaceted approach, as you'd expect. What's the next year? What does the next year hold for AWS? What's the strategy going forward?
The strategy has been and always will be the same. We listen intently to what our customers need. We build what they need rapidly, and then we put it out in the marketplace for them. We work backwards from the customer. More than 90% of what we build is what they've asked for, and we will continue to do that even in this area. Everything that I just described came out of that process. So we would rather listen to the experts, the telcos themselves, about what they need, and use our flexibility and our infrastructure to deliver what they need very quickly.
Great. Exciting times.
It has been, very much so. And never a dull moment in this industry.
Yeah. So hopefully if we have this conversation again this time next year, there'll be all kinds of exciting new news and use cases coming out, and telco customers able to give us some real insight into how their journey's evolving.
Dean, while I'd love to say we should wait for next year, I think we need to get together quicker because it's changing every week. There are new applications that we're generating and putting out in the field every week. So how about weekly?
Yeah.
if you can.
Or at least at DTW in Copenhagen in June.
I look forward to it.
Great. Thanks for your time today.
Thank you, Dean.
Okay, we're back. Thank you.
Sure. Sorry about that technical interruption. I'm glad that Martha's there to help and execute. So thanks a lot. Okay. Sure. Good. I'm glad. It's always very weird for me when I can't see the person's face who's speaking. So apologies, commission members. I don't know where you are or where you're speaking from, but thanks for chiming in. Okay. So to resume, obviously there's a lot of exciting stuff happening in the telecom industry. I wanted to give you this chart as well so you could see some of the specific use cases that they were alluding to in the video and some of the ways in which generative AI is really making a difference. I think our business team believes that generative AI represents like the next evolution in the AI technologies that can assist public agencies and the telecom industry to create all sorts of diverse content and assist their employees, improve their operations. So I wanted to, show you this slide so you could see some of the specifics. So like, for example, customer support. Generative AI is helping to instantly provide accurate and personalized responses to customer queries and issues via chatbots and virtual assistants. Network performance is another area where we hear from customers.
We're not
Yes.
seeing the slides.
Do you see them now?
Not yet.
Hi.
We're seeing YouTube now. Maybe now.
How about this?
Thank you so much.
Okay.
We're on artificial intelligence use cases.
I'm back. Okay, good.
Thank you.
Very sorry about that. You're like, what is she talking about? Okay, well, now you have the visual of what I was talking about. Again, I apologize for the technical difficulties. Thanks for your patience. Sure. Okay, so I was talking about things like customer support, network performance, operations is another area. One of the things what was shared with me is that we're producing insights to help optimize operating costs and reducing revenue leakage through this sort of like cross-platform, cross-organization correlation and analysis. Marketing and sales efforts have been improved by generative AI. And, I heard the last speaker from the AG's office and you all talking about the no-call regulation. And I think there's an opportunity there to help assist with, making sure that citizens are not getting, fraudulent calls. And that's something we'll talk about a little bit with regard to the regulatory space. It's certainly an area of focus and attention from policymakers everywhere. And obviously is one of those no-brainer issues that we all want to fix. But I think one of the things you probably heard in the video was that, we work backwards from what customers are asking us for. And I think that would be a good example of the telecom industry saying, constituents and consumers are concerned that they are getting fraudulent calls and, work with us to try to put some proper tools in place and guardrails and protections to ensure that that isn't happening. I also heard a little bit about broadband access earlier today. I don't have a slide on this, but you may have heard about in the news or read about Project Kuiper. This is an Amazon-led effort to improve broadband access in rural areas. And I imagine there are some of those areas in Mississippi that, might be good use cases for Project Kuiper. It's basically an initiative to put low orbit and low latency satellites in space to provide high-speed broadband connectivity like around the world and in particular in underserved communities that may not have traditional access to broadband. So happy to follow up with some some information on that if you all are interested. It sounds like Kuiper will begin rolling out their service sometime in 2025. So hopefully,
Kuiper, K-Y-P-E-R, or what's the?
it's Kuiper.
Great, thank you. Thank you.
Sure. Okay. So next, wanted to give you a little bit of perspective on the regulatory landscape. And the reason I title this slide under development is because it is very much under development. As you can see, I have some icons here from NIST, which is, our domestic source of truth, really, for standards around technology. And many state lawmakers and policymakers are looking to NIST to provide a basis for, how American companies and American citizens should be thinking about these technologies with regard to, the definitions and particular sorts of frameworks for industry to abide by to ensure that the proper guardrails are in place, particularly where there are high-risk uses of artificial intelligence. You also have ISO, which is the International Standards Organization. We've worked really closely with them, and many others across the world are as well in our space, to try to set some international standards for these technologies. There's a particular standard 42001, which applies to the development, deployment, and use of AI. We are one of the first cloud providers that has gotten ISO 42001 certification for many of our artificial intelligence and machine learning services. And we're hoping to, continue these sorts of partnerships with these standards creating organizations in order to provide assurances and comfort to our customers that we are doing our best to abide by standards that are being put in place both at a national and international level. And then I'm sure you've heard about the European Union's AI Act. This is really the first big, what we call horizontal style regulation of artificial intelligence. It's very broad. The compliance is going to be very complex for small to medium-sized businesses. Everyone in industry is working out right now how to comply, how to help their customers comply. But it will be a very interesting use case to see how provisions from the EU AI Act are either replicated or transformed, both in the US and elsewhere. You may have also heard Colorado passed a comprehensive AI law this past May. The law focuses on risks, high-risk uses of AI, and the ways in which both developers of artificial intelligence systems, those are the entities like AWS traditionally, who are developing the systems, training the underlying large language models and smaller models through which the deployers of the systems are utilizing that information and deploying AI systems for high-risk uses. One of the things that we focus on here at Amazon is ensuring that organizations like you all and state policymakers understand that there are hundreds of thousands of uses of AI. There are a subset of AI systems that are being used for high-risk purposes, and we would think of those as systems that are making determinations on an automated basis for its users or constituents related to things like housing and education, access to education, insurance, things that are really impacting people on a legal and significant basis and significant level. So what do we expect to see in 2025? Looking back just quickly at 2024, we saw over 800 bills introduced at the state level with regard to artificial intelligence. And they really ran the gamut of those which basically created a task force to study within the state. Those task forces could be narrowly focused on how state agencies are using AI systems, how consumers are using AI systems, trying to understand the technology overall. In Oregon, for example, the task force is really focused on definitions. We would say that that's fairly important, but a very, very tough task. Certainly as NIST and ISO and other standards creating organizations are trying to, level set on what those definitions should actually be, but it's really tough when the technology is evolving. It was funny thinking about this presentation. I thought a lot about the telecom industry and how far things have evolved and in the space, over many, many decades, but there's always something new. There's always a new way in which, the telecommunications tech is transformative and evolving. Even just the broadband access discussion is fairly new in the realm of telecommunications. So very, very interested to see where this all goes. But I anticipate, in addition to those task force type bills, we're going to see a lot of bills related to like deep fakes, like it was referenced earlier. The bot calls to constituents that are concerning, but maybe more focused on protecting kids and regulating around CSAM or child sexual abuse material. Ensuring that elections and campaigns are sound and deep fakes, which are created around campaigns, are regulated appropriately. So those are the things we would consider like a sector-specific type of bill, or you heard me earlier say the EU AI Act is more of like a horizontal type of regulation. Those bills and other pieces of legislation and guidance we've seen introduced from CIO offices and elsewhere that are targeted at like deep fakes, as an example, would be more sector specific and something we'd call a vertical piece of regulation. So we'll also see things like, wanting to put proper watermarking technology in place where it's useful. We're going to see more bills addressing algorithmic discrimination, the way that the Colorado AI Act did. And I'm sure we're going to see a lot more around data transparency and other sorts of AI safety measures that legislators and state agencies would like to see in place. Okay, so just quickly, I wanted to discuss a little bit about how we see AI policy developing and what we hope with regard to policy development in this space. And, it really applies across the vertical and horizontal type regulation. We want to ensure that legislators and regulators understand that the technology is key, really, to tackling, like it says, some of humanity's most challenging problems. We want to see our customers using AI in like the agriculture space. We want to see them using it to, trend out like their crops and how wind and water can affect their crops. We want to see them, making sure that they're using it for healthcare uses that are going to be hugely impactful. I was just in a meeting last week about how AI is helping to map out the genomic code and those sorts of functions. But we also want to make sure that it's still human-centric, the technology itself, and that everyone can benefit from it. One of the things we talk about at AWS is democratizing access to AI. So we want to make sure that not only our customers have access to the latest and greatest technologies and services that we are putting out into the market, but we want to make sure that those who need access to understanding the technology can get it. So we have things like, we call it the Machine Learning University, where anyone can take a free or very low cost course in like, what is prompt engineering? What is AI overall? What does it mean when you say things like responsible AI? What does it mean for the company? What does it mean for the user or the customer? So that's, where we're going with that. With regard to regulations specifically, I think this statement is the most simplistic and easiest way to say it. We think that regulation should be risk-based, so focused on those sorts of high-risk use cases that I mentioned earlier, and appropriately assigned to the actors who are best positioned to address and mitigate any potential risks. So what that means is you'll see in some of the regulation that's come through, there's delineation between, a developer, a deployer, a user, very similar to what we've seen in data privacy laws with regard to a controller or processor, really trying to ensure that the regulation is clear and that those actors within what we call the AI value chain are capable of addressing the risks that are within their control. Okay, so the next slide here is another video. Marcia, I pinged this link to you, so hopefully you're able to play this on your end. This one's a really short video, and I just thought it was, really relevant to your discussions, given it's one of our telecommunications customers from Cox Communications. And the tail end of the video, it's just about 2 minutes. They talk a little bit about using Amazon Bedrock, which is one of our machine learning services that enables our customer builders to access different machine learning models and AI models to solve complex, problems and resolve them for their customers. So after this video, I'll be back on, and I'm here to answer any questions or take questions back that I can for our telecom team and get back to you. So
Great, thank you.
Sure.
I'm Joe Keller, Vice President of Operations and Technology Analytics at Cox Communications. We have over 6 million residential subscribers that we provide broadband services to. That's internet, video, and phone services. Historically, our industry has relied upon our customers to serve as our primary diagnostic, contacting us when they experience an issue. We were seeking some type of a solution that would allow us to harness the power of all the massive amounts of data that we have from cable modems and set-top boxes and put that to good use, enabling us to better detect and prevent customer issues from happening. And that's where we started to work in Amazon Web Services, harnessing the power of the next generation capabilities that AWS has to offer us in order to stand up our novel framework called Service Health. Service Health allows us to start identifying patterns of imminent failure, proactively reaching out to our customers in scenarios where they experience issues. We decided to go with Amazon Web Services because of the differentiating services, ease of use, and the capabilities that the platform offered us. With traditional analytics, we're able to derive insights from structured data. With Amazon Bedrock, we're leveraging all of the unstructured data that's available to us. This might be anonymized customer transcripts across chats and calls. This might be the journal entries that our technicians make when they're trying to remediate issues in our network. What we've been able to do is provide forensic tools now to our service assurance teams, our network operations center, as well as to our technicians in the field to start identifying optimizations across process, platforms, and policies to help improve upon their ability to resolve complex and elusive issues more quickly. This is an untapped gold mine of data that prior to now we haven't been able to tap into.
Great video.
Good, I'm glad.
Yes, thank you.
Yeah, sure. I mean, I have loads of other resources for you. I'm happy to share whatever is helpful for your particular goals for the commission. We're happy to be a resource to you all. We're very excited to be working in Mississippi and providing a lot of customer benefits there and working very closely with your state government and commission members. So happy to be here. And if you have any questions, I'm happy to take them. I think I'm running close to time, maybe running into your lunch, but I'm here. If not, happy to answer questions later.
Great. Thank you for accommodating us. Commissioner Stamps?
Thank you for your presentation. It was very thorough. I don't have any questions, but I appreciate the partnership with Amazon Web Services in Mississippi.
Great.
And Ms. McKinney did a great job. Appreciate your presentation, and I'll echo what Commissioner Stamps said. It's glad to have AWS in Mississippi. We look forward to a bright future for both of us.
Excellent. Great. Well, nice to meet you all virtually, and hopefully I'll see you in Mississippi soon.
Great. Thank you. Have a good day.
You too. Bye.
Well, that concludes our telecommunications summit. So, Commissioner Stamps, any closing remarks?
I just want to appreciate your vision of putting these summits together. They've been rewarding, educational, and enlightening for all the communities. So I look forward to continuing to learn and grow and do better.
Sounds good. You've got a couple coming up too that we're excited about. So look forward to 2025. It has been very educational. I want to thank all of our staffs. Josh, getting a lot of these lined up. It's been a very, very educational journey with the summits. And like I said, what originated those, or the genesis of those, is our offices, us being new, people calling and asking who has authority over this and that. So that put us down this trail of understanding how the state works, how we regulate or don't regulate certain areas. So it's been very educational, and we look forward to 2025 and more educational summits. And we look forward to working for the betterment of the future of the state of Mississippi. So all minds clear. Thank y'all again for coming. Thanks again to everybody for your help and work. With that, we stand adjourned.